Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sand-swept golden nightmare that is the life of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. Yep, the so-called god kings of the Nile who built pyramids, ruled with divine authority, and honestly lived lives more stressful than yours during finals week with no sleep and 8 open tabs of existential dread. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. No, really. Being a pharaoh means everyone wants you to be perfect, immortal, politically brilliant, and sexually prolific starting from like age 6. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know your city and the time you're listening. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into royalty, which sounds cushy, sure. But let's not pretend it's a golden cradle and gentle harp music. You come into the world squirming and crying like every other human baby, except you're not just a bobby, you're a living god. That's what the priests whisper anyway. People bow when they see you, your wet nurse isn't allowed to make eye contact, and the walls around your nursery are painted with divine scenes of Horus defeating chaos. You try to nurse, you try to sleep, mostly you fail. A symbolic hawk carved from alabaster watches you at all hours. No pressure, your mother is probably your father's sister, because royal blood must stay pure, though in practice that means your gene pool is more of a puddle. The midwives keep their heads bowed, chanting to Youre, the goddess of childbirth, as you wail and flail. Outside, temple officials already argue over your horoscope. One claims your birth aligns with a rare conjunction of Venus and Sirius. Another mutters that you'll either bring 40 years of peace or plunge Egypt into famine. They all agree on one thing: you must be protected, or more accurately, controlled. From the moment you can hold your head upright, you're placed into the royal education machine. Your tutors, stern and dressed in robes that smell faintly of incense and anxiety, begin teaching you the sacred scripts, the myths of Ra, how to perform rituals with precision, and, most importantly, how to keep your face unreadable. You're watched constantly. Every cry, every stumble, every too loud laugh at a court jester's awkward fall is noted by scribes. Even your toys are symbolic. You get a miniature throne to sit on during public feasts, surrounded by nobles who pretend to adore you, but quietly measure your every move like calculating crocodiles in human form. You learn early that not everyone wants you to live. Poisoned pomegranate juice? Plausible. A falling statue during a festival? Suspicious. You once find a small clay doll buried outside your window, its limbs broken, its face etched with your name in tiny hieroglyphs. You don't understand at the time, but your nurse goes pale and orders extra guards posted at your chamber door. Someone's working sympathetic magic against you. In simpler terms, a death curse. Welcome to the toddler tier of palace politics. Still, you manage to survive your first decade. Barely. And by survive, I mean you master the art of never being fully relaxed. When you sleep, it's with the knowledge that the gods expect your future to be flawless. When you dream, you see your father's stern face floating among the stars, nodding disapprovingly every time you forget the name of a lesser fertility deity. Sometimes, in the rare quiet moments between language drills and ceremonial dress rehearsals, you sneak off to play in the palace garden. There, the world feels oddly normal. You chase butterflies. You climb a sycamore fig tree and get sap on your royal tunic, but even there, you're never alone. Your playmate is a noble's child, carefully chosen for loyalty. The guards stand behind the shrubs, pretending not to watch but very much watching, and always, always that alabaster hawk figurine is with you, stuffed into a sash at your waist. Protection, surveillance, both. You're around 7 when the priesthood begins, including you in low-tier rituals. Not full-on human sacrifice, Egypt never really did that, despite the rumours, but small bloodlettings of sacred bulls, ceremonial incense burning, and recitations from scrolls so old they practically crumble. You stand beside your father, still the reigning pharaoh, and mimic his hand motions. He looks impossibly powerful in his Nimmy's headdress and gold collar. You, meanwhile, are trying not to sneeze from the cloud of myrrh smoke. One evening, you witness something that will stick in your brain forever. A condemned palace servant is brought forth for a quiet execution, poisoned, swift and silent. No one speaks of it afterward, but you catch a glimpse of your father's eyes when it happens. Not cold exactly, just resigned. Like this is the 90th time and it no longer means anything. You tell yourself that day you'll never become like that, but deep down you suspect you already are. And through it all, the god narrative builds. You are said to be Horus in the flesh. Horus, the falcon-headed avenger who defeated Set, the god of chaos. Priests recite it daily. Your mother whispers it before bed. You begin to say it under your breath during moments of fear. I am Horus, I am Horus, I am Horus. You want it to be true. You want to believe you're something more than a frightened child in a robe too large for your body, surrounded by adults playing roles in a performance too vast to understand. But the truth, unspoken and unsettling, is that even you don't fully believe it. You're a kid, you stub your toe, you cry when your pet cat dies. You hate radishes. God kings aren't supposed to have those problems. And yet, here you are, burdened with eternity before you've even lost your baby teeth. One actual historical fact. Royal children were often raised alongside chosen companions who'd later become elite advisors, a clever way to ensure loyalty. Quirky fringe fact. Some pharaohs claim to be born from divine conception through a god taking human form. Literal god babies, no big deal. Ongoing scholarly debate. There's still discussion about how much power boy kings like Tutankhamun really had, versus how much was handled by regents and priests. By the time you're 12, you've already survived more power plays than most adults ever will. You're not just the heir anymore. You're a tiny walking institution. Your voice is cracking, your shoulders are narrow, and your ceremonial beard still has to be tied on with string. But none of that stops the high priest from reminding you daily that the gods chose you. Chose you, not your cousins, not your uncle in the Delta who's suspiciously generous with grain. And absolutely not that general with the annoyingly perfect jawline who keeps showing up at court with just a few questions about military budgets. Your tutors drill you mercilessly. There are no off days. You rise with the sir, your body dragged from dreams by the smell of burning lotus and the metallic chill of a bronze basin poured over your head. You dress in stiff linens, eat figs and barley cakes with your fingers, and then you sit, stone-backed and wide-eyed, for hours of instruction. Geography of Nubia, lineage of Horus, the latest omens seen in the entrails of a sacrificial goose. You absorb it all because you must. Not because you want to. Want doesn't enter into it anymore. And then there's your throne. Your actual miniature throne, built so you can participate in ceremonies and audiences without having to stand on tiptoe or sit on a grown-up lap like a baby. It's carved from acacia wood and inlaid with lapis lazuli and ivory. You look regal in it, if you squint past the way your legs dangle above the floor. Your first public appearance as co-ruler happens under the glaring sun, your face caked in sacred oils and anxiety. Your job is to repeat after the priest, raise your scepter at the right times and try not to faint. You almost nail it. Almost. Behind you, your father watches closely. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. Every twitch of his eye is a message. Don't mess this up. Afterward, you return to the palace, peeling off your crown, your scalp itchy and red from the heat. The royal barber applies a cold poultice and tells you kindly that you did well. You nod, pretending to believe it. Even now, the risks are everywhere. You're not just a child, you're a living symbol. That means that anyone who wants to challenge your father's rule sees you as part of the problem, or the solution. A weapon, a puppet, a hostage. One day you overhear a conversation you weren't meant to hear. Two court officials arguing quietly in a stone corridor. One says, "He's too young." The other replies, "That's exactly why we need him on the throne now." They stop talking when you walk by, bowing low and fake smiling. You keep walking, but your stomach knots. You start to notice who doesn't bow as deeply, which servants stop whispering when you enter a room, which guards exchange glances behind your back. Your nurse begins burning more incense at night, muttering prayers to Wadjet, the cobra goddess who guards royalty. You ask her once if she's afraid. She tells you no. Her eyes say otherwise. Your games, such as they are, turn darker. You stop pretending to be the sun god blessing crops. Instead, you play court intrigue with your ceremonial dolls. One is the scheming uncle, one is the high priest with secret plans, the others all end up in a box labelled buried alive. Your nurse says it's not appropriate. You say it's just a game, but a tiny part of you knows it's practice. Then comes the lesson in deception. One of your tutors brings in an actor, a trained liar from the temples of Thoth. You think it's a performance, a break from lessons. Instead, you're taught how to lie convincingly, how to mask fear, how to speak in half-truths so gracefully no one notices the missing pieces. You spend hours practicing your public voice, steady, confident, with just a touch of distant divinity. They teach you to hold eye contact for exactly 3 seconds longer than is comfortable, how to cry then stop on command, and how to lie about how much sleep you're getting. You're not even 15, and you already understand something that will follow you for life. No one wants to see the real you. They want the image and the silhouette, the ritual, the myth. The pharaoh must never yawn, frown, or second guess. You learn to become that shadow. It's easier than it should be. One morning, a fellow noble's son goes missing. Not dead, just gone. His family is quietly reassigned to a remote province. You remember playing with him once in the gardens. You never find out what happened. But you remember he had asked questions, too many, about taxes, about grain stores, about whether the gods really chose kings or if men just said they did. You stop asking your own questions after that. Still, there are moments. Brief, strange ones. You sit with your father on the palace roof one night, watching the stars slide across the sky. He's unarmoured, unpainted, just a tired man in linen. He tells you something you won't forget. A god cannot have doubt, but a pharaoh must. You look at him confused. He doesn't explain. Just offers you a slice of melon and tells you to go to bed. Historically, Egyptian princes often became junior pharaohs or co-regents before their fathers died, allowing for smoother transitions of power. A fringe fact: one young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, was allegedly so sheltered he never learned how to swim despite living near the Nile. And a debated topic: how much of the young heir's training was ideological versus practical? Scholars disagree on how thoroughly royal children were actually prepared for independent rule. The day your father dies, everything is loud and too quiet at once. There are no public tears, only drums and ululations echoing through stone halls like ghosts refusing to move on. He doesn't die in battle, or struck down by a god's vengeance. No, he dies in his sleep, which somehow feels worse, less noble, less memorable. But in Egypt, death isn't the end, it's the beginning of a much bigger, much more complicated mess. You're crowned pharaoh in a sand-sweat ceremony that smells like jasmine, wet copper and pressure. The entire city of Thebes practically shuts down to witness it. The Nile slows, the sun seems to hover in place. Or maybe that's just heat stroke. You stand on the dais in your best linen robes, your hands sticky with ceremonial oils, as the priests place the crook and flail across your chest. One represents kingship, the other punishment. You try not to think about which you'll need more. Your name is spoken aloud by the high priest of Amun, dragged out like a spell. You are declared the living Horus, the chosen of Ra, beloved of Ma'at, lord of the two lands. You can barely keep your legs from shaking. And then, just like that, it's real. Everyone bows, even the vizier, who never blinks, even your mother, though only slightly. The great statue of Osiris behind you casts its shadow down your back, cold and commanding. You want to feel powerful, you really do, but mostly you feel trapped, like you've just walked into a room that no one ever leaves. You ride through the city on a chariot with gilded wheels, the reins stiff in your hands. The people cheer, children toss petals, elders chant old hymns. Somewhere deep in the crowd, a single voice cries out something you can't hear. Your guards react too quickly for it to be harmless. You don't ask what happened. You've learnt not to ask. Back at the palace, you're led through the private post-coronation rites. First, a purification bath. Then an offering to your father's spirit. A plate of food you aren't allowed to eat. Finally, you're locked alone in a temple chamber for an entire night with only a flickering oil lamp, a stack of sacred scrolls, and a small statue of Thoth, watching you with painted eyes that seem far too alert. You're supposed to commune with the gods, but mostly you sit in silence, wondering if the entire building will collapse and seal you in. That would be a pretty divine message. By dawn, your muscles ache and your eyes sting. You step out of the chamber, blinking against the rising sun, and the priests nod approvingly. You did it. You're pharaoh now. Not a trainee, not a child king with a ceremonial title. The real deal. Everyone expects you to act like it, immediately. You quickly discover that ruling Egypt is less divine destiny and more non-stop crisis management. Within days, a tax dispute erupts between two nomarchs. Grain prices spike. A Nile flood washes away half a village. You're handed dozens of scrolls daily, all urgent, all in impossibly small script. You start learning to make decisions based on facial expressions alone. Your advisors give a tight-lipped smirk when the answer is yes, a brief throat clear when it's absolutely not. And yet no one ever tells you what to do. You're supposed to already know. After all, you're the living embodiment of order. You are Ma'at. So when you hesitate, people look nervous. When you frown, they sweat. You start smiling more. It feels like a lie, but it works. Your first decree is purely symbolic, a tax exemption for temple workers during the month of Thoth. Everyone applauds, the priests love it. Your people, less so. Turns out temple exemptions mean fewer resources for the folks actually growing food and building homes. But no one says that out loud. Instead, someone leaves a carved beetle charm under your throne. A scarab of warning. You have it buried. You don't ask who left it. Ceremonies pile up like sand in your sandals. Every day is a new festival, a fresh god to please. Ra at dawn, Hathor by noon, Anubis at dusk. You wave your arms, say the prayers, pour the oils, smile like you mean it. Behind the scenes, you're exhausted. You fall asleep at your table. You forget names. One day you call a visiting Libyan envoy divine horse meat. You recover with a laugh, but it echoes longer than it should. Your body isn't holding up either. Your knees ache from kneeling. Your skin blisters under ceremonial gold. And the fake beard? It's heavy, tied too tight. Once it falls off mid-ritual and the look on the high priest's face suggests the gods might cancel the flood season out of spite. You apologize to a statue of Sekhmet just in case. One night alone in your chambers, you stand in front of a polished bronze mirror and try to see a god in the reflection. You tilt your chin, squint, raise the crook. It's still just you, tired, young, unsure. You hear your father's voice in your head again. A god cannot have doubt, but a pharaoh must. The court begins shifting. Old officials retire due to age. New ones arrive, more ambitious, more eager to whisper in your ear. Your vizier, still silent and unreadable, watches them all like a hawk perched on a knife's edge. You ask him one day if he trusts anyone. He answers with a rare smirk. I trust the gods, sometimes. Historically, the pharaonic coronation ritual could take months and included multiple stages, especially if the previous ruler died unexpectedly. A quirky fact, some pharaohs had their own scent signature, combining rare oils and flowers so their presence could be smelled in a room. Debated topic, the extent of actual political power early pharaohs had during their first years. Some scholars believe the priesthood ran everything behind the scenes. There's a moment early in your reign when you stare down at the crook and flail in your lap and wonder what they really are. The crook, curved like a shepherd's staff, is supposed to symbolize your care for the people. The flail, with its dangling cords, represents your power to punish, but in your hands, they feel like props, heavy, foreign, unwieldy. You realize those symbols are only useful if everyone around you keeps believing in them. If they stop believing, you're just a man in a fancy hat, waving sticks around. But there's no time for existential spirals, at least not out loud. Your daily schedule is brutal. Dawn prayers with the priests, decisions with the vizier, public appearances before your people. Every gesture must be perfect, every pause deliberate. You master the art of nodding as if you've already seen the outcome in a dream. You practice that serene, faraway gaze until your face aches. Wearing the beard, that stiff, ceremonial chin strap of authority, is a full-time commitment. It's fake, of course, but no one's supposed to say that. It's made of boat hair or metal, depending on the occasion, tied tight against your skin with invisible cord. You've had to eat with it, sleep with it, even pray while it scratches your jaw. During one sunrise offering, it slides slightly sideways and nearly knocks over a sacred lotus bowl. Everyone freezes. You calmly adjust it and continue the ritual, even as your cheeks burn under the paint. You're expected to attend to justice, or ma'at, the sacred principle of balance and order, which means court cases, lots of them, theft, land disputes, accusations of sorcery. Each one is paraded before you, the accused on their knees, the accusers trembling. You're supposed to listen with divine patience. You're supposed to channel wisdom from the gods, but most of the time you're winging it. You ask a few questions, squint meaningfully, so, and let your scribes handle the rest. Your judgments are fair, mostly, or at least theatrical enough to seem fair. One case sticks with you. A temple baker caught diluting grain offerings to the gods with cheap barley husks. He admits it with tears in his eyes, explaining that his daughter is sick and the physicians won't treat her without extra silver. Your advisors look to you expecting punishment. You hesitate. Not because you don't know what to do, but because you suddenly realize the gods never have to live like this. Only the people do. You exile him instead of executing him. The priests glare, but the people cheer silently in their eyes. You're starting to understand that power is a performance, not the loud, obvious kind, the slow, careful kind. You learn how to enter a room with your shoulders back, how to speak in a measured tone even when your stomach growls. You stop eating in public unless it's ceremonial. You stop showing emotion unless it's awe, reverence, or mild celestial smugness. You also learn to keep secrets, like how you wake up sometimes gasping from dreams you can't describe. One night you dream you're buried alive inside a golden statue. Another night you're flying over the Nile as a hawk, only to plunge suddenly into a black pool filled with whispering skulls. You try telling a temple priest about it. He nods sagely, burns incense, and tells you it's a sign of divine favour. You don't mention it again. Your political education continues. You learn to read faces like papyrus. Your vizier, for instance, always calm, always a half step behind you. He never speaks unless necessary, but when he does, it matters. You ask him once what makes a great ruler. He replies, one who survives long enough to be remembered fondly. Then he smiles in that way that isn't really a smile. You begin sleeping with a dagger under your pillow. Outside the palace, Egypt is thriving, or at least it looks that way from the gilded balconies. The Nile's last flood was generous, the granaries are full and temple donations are pouring in, but you've heard whispers. Tax collectors being too aggressive, merchants claiming temple officials confiscate goods in the name of the gods, then resell them. You're not sure where the truth ends and power games begin. You start sending trusted scribes in disguise to observe local markets. They report back with stories of bribery, intimidation, hunger. You order quiet reforms, reductions in grain quotas, stricter oversight of the collectors. The nobles complain, the priests mutter. But the people, they smile more when you pass by, that's just worth something. Still, not everyone is thrilled with a soft-hearted pharaoh. You hear it, whispered behind fans, tucked into coded language in scrolls. One official gifts you a carving of Youre, the god of chaos, with a caption praising the strength of necessary violence. You display it in your antechamber, then secretly move it to the latrine wall the next day. You begin to understand that you can't always show strength with force. Sometimes strength means listening, sometimes it means saying nothing, and sometimes, though it means smiling while you're being insulted in poetic metaphor, then tripling that noble's tax the following season. You get creative. You also start using the court artists in new ways. A massive mural is commissioned in one of the temple courtyards, showing you defeating a lion with your bare hands. You've never seen a lion, much less fought one, but the story catches on. Children chant it, poets write songs about it. You never confirm or deny it. Myth is stronger than fact. Historically, pharaohs were seen as literal gods, but their image had to be carefully maintained with rituals and propaganda. Weird fringe fact? Some royal statues had fake beards made of tightly curled metal strips, believed to enhance godliness through shape alone. And a scholarly debate. Were pharaohs truly revered as divine by the common people, or was the religious theatre more about maintaining elite power? Scholars still argue both sides. The mask is everything, not the golden funerary one you'll be buried with, that comes later. No, this mask is invisible but always there. It sits on your face during morning prayers, hardens during council meetings, and stretches into a beatific smile during public feasts. It's the face of the pharaoh, perfect and unhutched. You become an expert at hiding behind it. Your people see that serene, divine face and believe that it must be nice being you. Dripping in gold, wrapped in linen, your feet never touching dirt. But what they don't see is the machinery behind the mask. The endless meetings, the infighting, the secret scrolls handed off under moonlight. They don't see the small moments when you're alone with your thoughts, trying to remember whether a particular nomarch is actually loyal or just better at pretending than you are. Every morning begins the same way, incense smoke curling into the beams of sunlight spilling across your chamber, the soft chanting of priests outside your window, and the sensation of silk being draped over your shoulders by silent servants. You sit before a mirror made of polished copper, while attendants outline your eyes in kohl, both for beauty and for protection against the sun and evil spirits. The result is haunting. You don't even look like you anymore. You look like him. The God King version of you. and for most of the day that's who you have to be. The court artists adore this new you. Every temple receives a stylized image of your face, idealized, symmetrical, impossibly calm. The features are standardized now. Almond eyes, full lips, a brow untroubled by thought or fear. Even your enemies worship that image because they fear it. And that, you learn, is the point. Your actual face is only seen by a handful of people. The high priest, your vizier, a few favoured servants who know not to look you in the eye for too long. They know the truth that the living god gets headaches, that the divine ruler occasionally coughs blood into his sleeve, that beneath the mask is someone constantly calculating, adjusting, second-guessing. One afternoon, during a festival honouring Bastet, the cat goddess, you feel your mask crack for just a moment. A foreign envoy from Hatti presents you with an offering that's clearly a bribe. Rare wine, exotic fabrics, a trained dancing monkey. You're supposed to act gracious. You're supposed to accept it with divine detachment. But something about the envoy's smug tone or the way he winks when he says eternal friendship gets to you. You smile, too widely. The mask wobbles. Then you stand, take a goblet of the wine, sip it slowly, and calmly ask if the envoy has ever seen a monkey devoured by a crocodile. The room goes silent. He laughs nervously, unsure if it's a joke. You don't blink. You never even mention the monkey again. The gifts are accepted, but the envoy's request is denied. Politely, of course. He returns home shaken. Message sent. Still the mask takes its toll. You find yourself rehearsing smiles before entering a room, practicing neutral expressions in mirrors just to make sure nothing leaks through. Your heart pounds during simple conversations. You stop eating meals in public because your jaw tightens when you chew. Even during religious rites, when you're supposed to be one with the gods, your mind races with court gossip, trade reports, and subtle glances from nobles who may or may not be plotting your downfall. You miss silence. You miss being able to blink and not have it interpreted. You even miss being laughed at for something stupid, because now no one dares. One day, a scribe trips over a stool in your presence. He panics, face pale, assuming punishment is coming. You wave it off with a small laugh and say, "Even the gods stumble." The room lets out a collective exhale, but the scribe avoids you for weeks after that, convinced he's marked. Occasionally you sneak out of the palace in disguise, simple robes, no makeup, but a small retinue pretending to be your family. You walk the markets, listen to gossip. It's dangerous, but it's worth it. One time you hear a fish vendor grumble about temple taxes, saying, "If the pharaoh really spoke to the gods, maybe he'd ask them to feed us better." You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's true, and because no one recognizes you. Your vizier finds out about these excursions too, of course. He says nothing, but the next time you try, the guards shadow you a little closer. You never get truly lost again. There's one strange comfort to the whole charade. You're not alone. Every pharaoh has worn the same mask. Every one of your ancestors practiced the same deception. The statues of Ramses, Djoser, and Hatshepsut, those calm, ageless faces weren't real either. They were armour. And now the armour is yours. You start adding little touches to the myth. Commission new hymn-zams that praise your ability to see through deception. Order that your cartouche be carved slightly larger than your father's on the temple walls. Subtle but noticed. You know this game now. It's not about being good. It's about being remembered. In private, you still question it all. You sit under the stars and wonder if the gods actually see you, or care. You ask yourself whether you're doing any good, or just keeping the machine running until it swallows you whole. But you never say those things out loud. Even the walls here whisper. Historical fact. Pharaohs commissioned state art with deliberately idolized features to reinforce divine status, regardless of how they looked in real life. Weird fringe fact. Some wore false ceremonial beards even if they were women, like Hatshepsut, to maintain the masculine image of divine kingship. Ongoing debate. To what extent was the pharaoh's mask imposed by religion and statecraft, versus willingly adopted as a tool for control? Knights aren't peaceful anymore. They used to be, back when you were a boy playing at being divine, before the crown fit tightly enough to leave an imprint. Now they're dense with incense smoke, murmuring priests and dreams that feel more like visitations. You've come to accept that your sleep belongs to the gods, or at least to the people who speak on their behalf. Tonight, like most nights, you're summoned to the inner sanctum of the temple for divine communion. They call it sleeping with the gods, though it's nothing like actual sleep. The Temple of Sobek, dedicated to the crocodile god, has a side chamber filled with scented oils, sacred relics, and something vaguely alive in a pit just out of view. A crocodile, presumably, the god's living avatar. You're not sure if it's hungry or just meditating in the dark. You try not to think about it. You lie down on a stone slab, cooled by wet lotus petals and a thin linen sheet. A priest smears a thick salve on your forehead, something slick and herbal that makes your vision shimmer. You smell blue lotus, myrrh, something darker underneath, like copper coins in a wet cloth. Another priest leans in and whispers prayers in your ear, voice low and rhythmic, like he's tuning your thoughts for the gods to read. You feel yourself sliding sideways, the ceiling warping, the air growing too thick to breathe. This is the part they call divine contact, but it doesn't feel so holy. It feels like falling into the Nile with your arms tied and your lungs filling slowly with dream water. Images come quickly. Crocodiles with human hands, the god Ra weeping fire that burns up all your scribes, a river that flows backward, filled with your own dismembered statues. You try to wake up. You can't. You try to speak. Nothing. Then the voice comes, low, deep, echoing with centuries. It tells you something something that feels important. But when you wake up hours later, drenched in sweat and flour paste, all you remember is the smell of blood and a word that might have been betrayal. The priests say the gods have shown you a warning. They say Sobek has revealed that a shadow grows near you, one with false loyalty and silent knives. You want to laugh, how helpful. But instead, you nod solemnly and ask what offerings the god requires. The answer is predictably, many. These temple sessions become regular. They say it's tradition, you suspect it's conditioning. Sometimes you're given herbal concoctions beforehand, teas that make your fingers tingle, and your thoughts loop in slow spirals. Other times you're simply left alone in a room full of incense until you hallucinate. The priests interpret everything. A bird lands on a windowsill? That's a sign. You dream of your father frowning? Obviously a divine warning. You trip on a stair? The gods are displeased. Everything is symbolic. You stop trusting symbols. At court you maintain your balance. Barely. After one particularly vivid temple night, you attend a feast in the Temple of Ra, trying not to stare too long at the sun disk carved into the ceiling. It reminds you too much of your dreams. You listen to nobles recite poems in your honour, their metaphors oozing with both flattery and veiled insults. One describes your reign as a river just beginning to flood. You smile as if it's a compliment. You wonder how many of them are in on whatever shadow the crocodile god was hinting at. You begin keeping your own notes. Secret scrolls tucked behind loose stones in your private quarters. Dreams, names, glances. You start connecting things. That scribe who suddenly transferred to the Delta. The nomarch who sent you incense from a grove that doesn't exist. The guard who flinched when you mentioned Sobek. You don't know what you're looking for, but it feels better to do something than to sit passively while reptiles whisper warnings in your head. And then there's your sleep, or rather, the absence of it. You stop sleeping through the night. Sometimes you sit on your roof for hours, wrapped in a linen robe, watching stars crawl across the sky like beetles with nowhere to go. The palace is too quiet, too still. You hear noises that aren't real. Whispers from empty hallways. Footsteps that stop when you look up. You know some of it's in your head. You also know some of it isn't. Your physicians offer solutions. Mandrake, blue lotus, a resin mixed with honey and rubbed on your gums. You try them all. Nothing helps. The dreams keep coming. Twisted visions of your tomb, of jackals with human faces, of the gods turning away when you speak. You bring it up once to your vizier. I think the gods are warning me, you say quietly. He sips his wine. That's their job, he replies. You should worry when they stop. You wonder how many gods he's watched abandon pharaohs before you. Sometimes the priests push your dreams too far. They suggest you offer a decree based on one. You dreamt of fire in the east? Must be a sign to attack the Hittites. You dreamt of a river drying up? Better raise taxes to fund more offerings. You resist, but gently, always gently. You can't afford to insult the gods or those who speak for them. So you lie. You start inventing dreams, small ones, vague ones, harmless enough to appease the temples but too abstract to become policy. And soon you realize that's how everyone's surviving. The priests perform the rituals, you perform the divinity. Everyone is lying to each other with a straight face and just enough incense to keep the air sweet. One historical fact: Egyptian temples often included dream incubation rooms where pharaohs or high priests slept, hoping to receive divine messages. Strange fringe detail: some rituals used crocodile blood or crushed beetles mixed with herbs to enhance visions. Debated idea. Were these divine dreams genuine belief or a form of state control through ritualized suggestion? Scholars lean both ways. Your first rebellion comes quietly, which is disappointing, honestly. You expected torches, shouting, maybe a dramatic betrayal during a festival, something that at least felt historic. Instead, it arrives on a folded scrap of papyrus, handed to you during breakfast by a sweating, wide-eyed courier. You're halfway through a honey-soaked fig when you read the words: Nubian garrison reports uprising, supplies blocked, command uncertain. You chew slowly, set the fig down, nod once. Get the vizier, you say. And just like that, your reign graduates to its first open test. You're not panicked yet. Every pharaoh faces rebellion at some point. It's practically a rite of passage. The trick is to survive it without looking rattled. You keep your mask firmly in place even while your advisors squawk like startled ibis around the council table. Apparently, a local noble in Lower Nubia, an old borderland you were told was stable, has decided he prefers ruling without you. He's stopped sending grain, redirected caravan routes, and declared himself protector of the south, which is code for "I'm coming for your crown, good luck." His name is Zekar, and according to your scribes, he's popular, well-armed, and fond of claiming divine visions of his own. Of course he is. The High Priest of Amun says this rebellion is a punishment from the gods for an impure heart somewhere in the palace. Helpful. Your generals say it's nothing, a localized hiccup. Also helpful. Your vizier just raises one eyebrow, which is less helpful and more unsettling. You respond with swiftness. That's what the records will say, at least. In reality, you spend one full day walking your gardens, turning over every option in your mind like a scribe weighing a badly translated tablet. You could send the army in full force, crush the rebellion, and make an example of Zekar. But war is costly and loud. It spreads discontent like fire spreads through papyrus. Or you could try subtlety, send emissaries, offer Zekar a seat at your court, flatter him into submission, then quietly remove him later. That would be cleaner if your own court didn't already see your favour as scarce gold. Making space for an upstart would signal weakness. By sunset, you make your choice. Both. You send your army south, led by your most obedient general, not your best one, your most loyal. Meanwhile, you send word to Zekar offering him divine pardon if he returns to the fold and kneels before you. You make sure the message drips with godly generosity and barely veiled threat. A silken dagger, sweetened with honey. Then you wait, and waiting is worse than dreaming of crocodiles. The court watches you closely. Everyone smells blood in the air and none of them are sure whose. You continue with your public duties, reciting prayers and overseeing rituals with perfect composure. But your mind stays far away, somewhere in the desert, trying to imagine Zekar's face as he opens your letter. Is he laughing? Does he think you're weak? A week passes, then another. Finally, news arrives. Your army has reached the outskirts of the rebellious city. No battle yet. Zekar's men are dug in. The general suggests waiting. You read the message twice, then you do something drastic. You send a small shipment of temple statues south. Statues of yourself, posed in victory over chaos. You send the godly image of yourself into a war zone as a psychological weapon. Your advisors are horrified. What if they're destroyed? One gasps. Then we build more, you say. Privately, you know it's a gamble, but symbols matter. If Zekar sees you already victorious in stone, maybe he won't bother trying to win in flesh. Meanwhile, you consult the gods, or at least their mouthpieces. You sit through yet another temple rite, pretending to listen while a priest reads omens from bird entrails. The gods favour swift justice, he declares. You don't ask which god or what kind of bird. You just nod, let the incense roll over your face and suppress the urge to sneeze. The strangest part, you're excited. Not about war, but about the clarity. In rebellion, there's no ambiguity. You know who your enemy is. You know what's at stake. The rest of the time, it's court politics, polite poison, and veiled threats tucked inside compliments. Here, it's simpler, brutal but simple. Eventually, Zekar replies, sort of. He sends back one of your messengers, missing 3 fingers and an eye. The message is clear, negotiations are over, you give the order. The fighting lasts 5 days. Your general leads a precise, unrelenting campaign, smashing the rebel forces and surrounding the city. Zeka disappears during the final night. Some say he drowned in the Nile. Others say he fled south into the desert to join a cult of lion worshippers. You don't care. He's gone. His name is scraped off the official scrolls. His statues are broken. His lands redistributed. You return to the temple, offer thanks to the gods, and order a new mural. You, crushing a serpent under your sandal. No mention of Zekar, just the serpent of chaos, as tradition demands. And just like that, you're a war hero. Historically, pharaohs did face rebellions, especially in border regions like Nubia or the Delta. Suppressing them often served as both political and religious theatre. A weird fringe note. One pharaoh reportedly sent statues of himself into hostile areas to preemptively assert dominance through iconography. Debated point. Did pharaohs personally lead battles, or were they figureheads while generals did the real work? Some records are suspiciously vague. There's no such thing as a simple marriage when you're a pharaoh. In fact, marriage might be the wrong word entirely. It's less about love and more about dynasty, politics, fertility, bloodlines. Oh, and family trees that look more like tangled necklaces. Welcome to one of the most uncomfortable truths of your reign. To keep the divine bloodline pure, you must marry someone who shares your blood. Frequently, that means your sister. Yes, your actual sister. The ceremony is lavish, of course. Trumpets, gold, processions lined with lotus flowers, and adoring citizens who cheer as if this isn't completely weird. You ride a chariot through the streets of Memphis while your bride, sister, rides in another beside you, looking equally rail and equally trapped. She wears the vulture crown of a great royal wife. You wear the blue war crown to look masculine and divine. It's all deeply symbolic, and incredibly awkward. You sit side by side during the banquet, smiling through platters of roasted goose and dates soaked in wine. Everyone's watching to see if you touch her hand, if she laughs at your jokes, if there's chemistry, which would be great, if you weren't still haunted by memories of chasing frogs with her when you were 8. But you're both professionals now, your smiles are convincing, you even make a toast about unity. No one raises an eyebrow. This is what's expected. In the official record, it's framed as a sacred union. 2 halves of the divine whole, Horus and Isis, reborn in flesh. The gods themselves once practiced this sort of union, so who are you to question it? The priests say your marriage will bring balance to the 2 lands. What they don't say is whether your wife actually likes you. Privately, things are complicated. She's sharp, smarter than most of your court. She speaks in riddles when she's annoyed, and always seems to know more than she should. You wonder how many letters she's exchanged with your vizier. You wonder if she's spying on you for the priesthood, or against it. At night, she wears kohl not just for beauty, but for battle. You learn quickly not to underestimate her. Your marriage is more alliance than romance, and soon more alliances follow. You're expected to take other wives, secondary wives, concubines, diplomatic brides from faraway lands. One day, a princess from Mitanni arrives at court, barely 16, smiling shyly, and carrying a caged parrot as a gift. You're told to make her feel welcome. You do, politely, politically, with no emotion. Your harem grows. It becomes a palace within the palace, off limits to most men, managed by a labyrinth of eunuchs, servants, and scheming noblewomen. You visit occasionally, just enough to show interest, not enough to spark chaos. Each woman represents a faction, a favour owed, a treaty signed. You're surrounded by beauty, but desire has no place here. It's strategy. Your chief wife, your sister Youre, still holds the throne beside you. She commands ceremonies, leads female festivals, and oversees temple offerings with quiet ferocity. People love her. Some love her too much. You start noticing whispers, glances between her and certain guards. You don't accuse her. That would be dangerous for you more than her. Instead, you tighten her security, change a few staff, let her know silently that you see everything, and she lets you know that she sees more. One night she leaves you a carved ivory amulet of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance. On the back, there's a single word etched in careful script, equilibrium, a reminder or a warning. You don't sleep well that night. Your children, when they come, arrive with great fanfare. Each birth is a political earthquake. Nobles jockey for position around the new royal baby, trying to guess who will be favoured. Will it be the child of the great wife, or one of the harem? You publicly name one of your sons heir. Privately, you wonder if he'll survive adolescence. You begin noticing which advisors suddenly become more attentive to your son, which guards request reassignment near the nursery. You place trusted scribes near his tutors. You test his food personally once or twice. You never tell anyone you've done it, but your sister sees you from across the room and nods, just once. As the years roll on, your harem becomes both a blessing and a threat. Some women arrive singing, others crying. Some seem genuinely grateful, a few have dead eyes. You start recognizing the ones who are sent to manipulate you. They ask subtle questions, comment on court politics, mention prophecies. You pretend not to notice. Occasionally you give them answers, carefully crafted, impossible to trace. You keep a tally in your head. Who loves you, who fears you, who wants to use you. It changes daily. Your sister grows more powerful. She begins attending council meetings on your behalf when you're busy with ritual. She oversees trade negotiations with foreign queens. One day, a minor rebellion is quelled before you even hear about it, and her personal seal is on the orders. You don't know whether to be impressed or alarmed. And then, one evening, she invites you to walk with her in the moonlight. Just the two of you, no guards, no advisors. You expect a trap, but it's just silence, cool air, the Nile glinting like polished silver. She says nothing for a long time, then simply, "Do you trust me?" You pause. Then answer the only way you can. Not completely. She smiles. Good, then maybe we'll survive. Historically, it was common for Egyptian pharaohs to marry siblings, reinforcing the divine bloodline and echoing the gods' own mythical unions. Fringe fact, some harem women were trained spies, used to manipulate court politics or pass information to rival families, and a scholarly debate. Was the great royal wife a figurehead, or did she wield actual political power behind the scenes? Depends which dynasty you ask. There's a strange kind of intimacy in eating with people who might kill you. Every so often you host private dinners for Egypt's religious elite, high priests, temple stewards, interpreters of dreams and intestines, all lined up around a long table under flickering lamplight, chewing in near silence while pretending none of this is a performance. They call it communion. You call it surveillance. Tonight, it's the Anubis cult's turn. They've travelled up from their sacred necropolis at Abydos, all of them wrapped in black linen and oiled to the point of glistening, eyes rimmed in deep coal smelling faintly of embalming resin and salt. Their leader, a gaunt man with long fingers and teeth that flash too often, is called Harkhuf. He claims to speak with the dead. Not metaphorically, literally. You nod politely and offer him a fig. The banquet begins, dates stuffed with almonds, river perch steamed in tamarind. Beer thick enough to chew. You eat sparingly, every bite pre-tasted by your food servant 3 hours earlier. You've never been poisoned, but the fear is almost ceremonial by now. Part of the ritual, part of the job. Harkhuf speaks slowly, like he's savouring each word. He describes the shifting balance between flesh and afterlife, and how Anubis guides kings more gently when they remember death often. He offers this with a grin, slicing his duck breast as if to illustrate. One of your generals across the table stiffens, you smile. I remember death every morning, and you say. He sits beside me at the council table. They laugh. You don't. The dinner continues, but there's tension. Not just because of Anubis, jackal-headed god of embalming, guardian of the tombs, but because everyone at this table knows the priesthood is growing bolder, richer, and possibly more loyal to their gods than to their pharaoh. You can feel it in the way they speak. Less flattery, so more divine guidance, as if you've become a client of their gods rather than the earthly representative of one. You excuse yourself early and retreat to your private quarters, the scent of charred onions and frankincense still clinging to your robes. Outside the air is thick. Crickets chirp. A breeze slips through the balcony carrying the scent of Nile water and distant fires. You sit for a moment and stare out at the temple skyline, each ziggurat a silhouette against the moon. You wonder which ones worship you, and which would celebrate your downfall in verse. In the weeks that follow, the Anubis cult becomes more visible. Harkhuf begins appearing at more court events, usually uninvited. You start receiving small gifts from him. A scroll said to be written by a dead prophet, a bone-carved ring said to protect the soul during nighttime journeys, a beetle trapped in amber labelled simply eternity. You accept them all. and keep them locked away. You learn that the Anubis priests are expanding their influence in the burial trade, offering discounted embalming to noble families, some of whom traditionally used other cults. This is more than generosity. It's a power grab. Control the dead and you control how the living want to be remembered. So you push back. You commission a new chapel to Osiris, god of the underworld, in full view of the Anubis temple in the capital. You invite the public, you dedicate statues, and you even reveal a new prophecy discovered in your personal scroll chamber, one that just happens to claim Osiris prefers centralized royal burials. Subtle, effective. The people begin shifting allegiance, just a little, enough to worry Harkhuf. He visits you again unannounced, offers a tour of their newest embalming chamber, says you should see where your body will become eternal. You decline with a smile. Later you send him a rare lotus seed wrapped in gold thread, labelled for planting after judgment. The struggle between king and priest is nothing new. You've read the histories. Pharaohs who allowed the temples too much power often found themselves reduced to ceremonial figureheads, paraded around like wax statues while real decisions were made in the shadows. You won't be that pharaoh. Still, there are rumours that Harkhuf has dreams about your death, where he walks behind your funeral procession and weeps too loudly. That he keeps a painted coffin in his chambers with your cartouche on it. That he has followers who wear your image upside down on pendants. Mockery disguised as devotion. You don't know how much of it is true, but it's enough. You begin reshuffling positions, quietly replacing certain temple officials with younger, more loyal ones. You promote a priestess of Maat whose sermons always mention the importance of order, your kind of order. You increase grain allocations to rival temples and publicly thank them for their unshakable loyalty to the throne. Harkhuf stops sending gifts, but his shadow lingers. At night, your dreams change. You see the jackal-faced god everywhere now, watching from doorways, following in procession, speaking in a voice that sounds suspiciously like Harkhuf's. One night you dream you're being embalmed while still conscious. Your lungs are packed with resin. You can't scream. You wake gasping and heart pounding. You tell no one. You start carrying a protective amulet, a carnelian scarab etched with ancient spells hidden under your tunic. Not because you believe it works, but because Harkhuf believes it works, and you want him to know you're ready for whatever death games he's playing. Eventually you learn of a failed plot. A scribe within the Anubis cult was caught trying to bribe a palace guard to leave a gate open. The guard, loyal to your vizier, reported it immediately. The scribe vanishes, the cult claims ignorance, Harkhuf claims spiritual sabotage from rival gods. You don't punish them publicly. Instead, you send a temple auditor, bury them in paperwork and scrutiny. The message is clear. The jackal may roam, but the pharaoh has teeth too. Historical fact: rivalries between temple cults were intense in ancient Egypt, especially between followers of Anubis, Osiris, and Amun, often intertwined with political maneuvering. Fringe fact: some Anubis priests were rumoured to sleep in tombs as part of their training, believing it enhanced their connection with the dead. Scholarly debate: were powerful temple cults like Anubis independent religious movements, or were they sometimes used as tools or threats by factions within the state? Still very much debated. The pyramid was supposed to be the easy part. That's what everyone tells you when you first sit down to discuss your tomb. Just pick the location, Your Majesty, and the rest falls into place. But nothing ever falls into place when the goal is to build a mountain of stone large enough to offend the sky. The project starts with a meeting of architects, priests, engineers, and a man who calls himself the Master of Alignments, whose only job seems to be pointing at stars and frowning. They present you with sketches, miniatures carved in ivory, and long-winded treatises on slope, symbolism, and cosmic resonance. You're told that your pyramid must face true north, that its dimensions must echo sacred numbers, that the burial chamber must rest beneath the weight of 1,000 years and the eye of Sirius. One guy insists the shape of the passages must allow your soul to vibrate into the afterlife. You take a long sip of date wine and nod. They want to build it in Saqqara, near your ancestors. You choose a new site, not to be difficult, but because you don't want your ghost squeezed between people who would probably judge your embalming technique. You pick a stretch of desert between Memphis and the cliffs, windy, sun-scorched, and blessedly empty. The priests grumble, the workers groan. You mark the spot with a gold-tipped staff, and the first shovel hits the ground that same week. You quickly learn the pyramid is not just a tomb, it's a statement, an economy, a machine. You're now employing thousands of workers, stonecutters, haulers, masons, painters, planners, guards, cooks, and so many scribes you have to commission extra ink. You need quarries, roads, labour camps, and a team of people just to handle prayers to keep the workforce motivated. You stand on a sandstone bluff one morning, watching the caravan of workers march toward your site like ants beneath a cruel sun, and you realise this isn't construction. This is consumption of resources, of human lives, of your legacy. The cost spiral instantly. You issue grain grants, gold tokens for loyalty, bonuses for families of workers lost to exhaustion, scorpion stings or collapsing scaffolding. You keep the workers fed and clothed barely, but they still work from sunrise until the air turns red and sharp with dust. Some sing songs about your greatness, others mutter curses into their calloused palms. You hear both. There are signs early on that your pyramid might become difficult. One wall cracks during initial excavation. A sacred scarab burrows into the first offering chamber and refuses to leave. A senior architect dies unexpectedly, collapsed in the sand, eyes wide, mouth full of gravel. You ask if it's a bad omen. The priest overseeing the construction shrugs and says, "The gods admire ambition," which is a nice way of saying build fast or die first. You walk through the site regularly, wearing your mask of benevolence. Workers bow, overseers salute. You see how the bricks rise slowly, tier by tier, like a staircase for a soul unsure of its footing. The heat is blistering, the air thick with lime dust and the bitter smoke of offerings. You breathe it in and wonder if it's entering your lungs or your future. One evening, a worker leaves you a gift, a crude figurine carved from discarded limestone. It shows you standing at the top of a pyramid, arms raised, with tiny stick people kneeling below. It's not flattering. The face is barely recognisable, but something about it feels real. You keep it hidden in a small chest in your quarters, beneath the jewels and temple scrolls. You tell yourself it's a joke. You also know it's probably the only sculpture of you made without supervision. You try to be humane. You allow festivals, extra bread rations on holy days. You even order a shaded break area built, a gesture that earns confused gratitude. But there are limits. One day, a group of workers refuses to return to their posts. Their overseer beats two of them, and suddenly the entire crew walks off. A pyramid construction strike. Historic, embarrassing, dangerous, Youre. Your advisors tell you to punish them publicly. Break spirits now before they break stone later. But you pause. Instead, you meet privately with the ringleader, a grey-bearded stonemason with rough hands and eyes like burnt honey. He speaks plainly. The gods won't remember you if we starve. You admire the nerve. You double the grain rations and assign a priest to bless their tools daily. The work resumes, slowly, but the murmurs soften. Still, the pyramid drains you, financially, spiritually. You order obelisks to be erected nearby, symbols of your eternal reach. You design murals for the inner chambers, some realistic, others pure fantasy. You're shown plans for a hidden tunnel to fool grave robbers. You suggest building a second false tomb entirely. Your architect says, that's a lot of lies for a man who says he'll live forever. You don't laugh. One night, standing atop the nearly finished base, you look out at the land you rule. The Nile cuts a dark path through the moonlit fields. Fires flicker in distant villages. Somewhere a worker is hammering late. You feel the weight of your legacy settling on your shoulders, heavier than the stones below your feet. This pyramid will outlive you. That's the hope. But what will it say about you? What will people see when they look up at it in 1,000 years? A monument to a god king, or the tomb of a man who feared being forgotten? Historical fact. Pyramid building employed thousands of skilled workers, not slaves, and was often seen as both national duty and spiritual labour. Fringe fact. Some pharaohs had decoy tombs built to confuse potential grave robbers, complete with false burial chambers and traps. Ongoing debate. Was the primary purpose of the pyramid religious, symbolic, or political propaganda? Archaeologists and Egyptologists still argue over which mattered most. The thing about being a living god is that sometimes you have to pretend the gods speak to you, even when they don't. Especially when they don't. You're expected to receive dreams, omens, and signs like regular people receive mail. But dreams are slippery, omens are vague, and most of the time the gods are eerily silent. You start improvising. Begins with a small problem. A rival noble gaining influence in the court. He's charming, sharp, and worst of all, popular. He's been whispering about grain mismanagement in the northern provinces and suggesting ever so politely that a firmer hand is needed in governance. You could confront him directly, but that would seem insecure. And you can't afford to look insecure when your beard weighs 10 pounds and your name is carved into mountains. So you do what pharaohs have always done when backed into a corner. You summon a god. You pick Ptah, the creator god of craftsmen, distant enough to seem impartial but respected enough to sound serious. One morning you emerge from your inner chamber after a long vigil and announce to your court that Ptah has spoken to you in a dream. You say his voice was like thunder rolling through the limestone cliffs. You say he declared your leadership sacred and warned of those who plant doubt in the fields of unity. No names, of course, but everyone knows. The court eats it up, the priests nod, the nobles murmur approval, and the rival noble smiles just a little too tightly. You've made your move without lifting a finger. No blood, just a whisper cloaked in divine authority. Later that week, the noble's grain shipments are delayed, his scribes reassigned, and his name quietly omitted from the next feast invitation list. He gets the message. But now that you've used a divine vision to silence one threat, people start expecting more. The high priest of Ptah arrives in your private garden and respectfully requests to know what other insights the god may have shared. You smile and say the gods speak only when they choose, which is true, but that doesn't stop you from choosing for them, so you make it a habit. You start crafting visions, not lies, exactly, but curated spiritual narratives. A flood means the gods are pleased. A drought is a test of national resolve. A comet is a signal to build a new temple. You announce these things slowly, with pauses and incense and just enough mystery to keep people on edge. Soon your words are repeated in markets, carved into temple walls and sung in children's rhymes. You've become your own prophet. One day, during a council meeting, your vizier leans in and says quietly, "They're starting to believe you see what they can't." You nod, and he adds, "That's good, until you start believing it too." He walks away before you can ask what he means. Then comes the real test. A border conflict flares near the Red Sea. Minor at first, a trade dispute, a stolen caravan, but it quickly spirals into bloodshed. The generals want permission to deploy troops, the priests want more sacrifices, the people want answers, and you want a sign. You go into seclusion for 3 days, not because you're fasting or meditating, but because you need time to craft a prophecy that feels divine and still lets you delay actual action. You pace your chambers, surrounded by scrolls of old prophecies, half-burned incense sticks, and your own restless thoughts. At last, you emerge and announce that the god Thoth has revealed a sequence of signs. The ibis will fly against the desert wind, and when it turns north, so too must we turn from violence. No one really knows what it means, but it sounds wise, poetic. The people cheer, the priests declare it sacred. The generals, however, are less impressed. Behind closed doors, you tell them to be ready anyway. You've learnt that false prophecy is only useful if it buys time. Real time, not just the ceremonial kind. And then something strange happens. One of your fake prophecies sort of comes true. You had declared that the gods wanted the Nile to be adorned with floating temples, symbolic barges filled with music, offerings and prayer. You thought it would be pretty, maybe good for morale. 2 weeks after the first barge sets sail, the floodwaters arrive early and unusually high. Crops thrive, markets bustle, the people rejoice. You're called a miracle worker. You know it's a coincidence. Probably, maybe, but a tiny part of you starts to wonder. Did you will the Nile to rise? Did the gods reward your pageantry? Or have you just grown so good at lying even nature plays along? Your priesthood takes the prophecy and runs with it. They name a holiday after the barge voyage. They create songs. They even claim that a glowing ibis was seen flying over the river at dawn. You don't bother asking if anyone actually saw it. Still, you're careful. You don't get greedy with visions, you space them out. Leave gaps for mystery. Too many prophecies and people start expecting too much. Not enough, and they start whispering about divine silence. It's a delicate rhythm. Eventually your rival noble, the one who inspired the first vision, retires. Voluntarily, he says. You send him a gold statuette of Ptah as a farewell gift. It arrives with no note, but he'll understand. Historical fact: pharaohs often claim divine visions or dream messages from gods to justify major political or religious decisions. Fringe fact: in some temples, birds like ibises were trained and released at specific times to simulate omens. Debated issue: were pharaohs cynically manipulating religion, or did they sometimes believe their own divine messages? Scholars argue both interpretations. The Temple of Ra is supposed to be a place of light. That's the idea. A sanctuary of solar truth where you, as the living Horus, commune with the sun god himself. But to you it feels more like a well-lit prison. The walls gleam with gold leaf and white limestone. The ceiling's painted with radiant blue and tiny stars, but the deeper you go, the heavier everything feels. You don't go there to find peace, you go to wrestle with silence. It begins as an attempt to find clarity. You've been up too many nights, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of your own breath, wondering if the gods ever actually look back. So one morning you dismiss the attendants, set aside the petitions, and walk barefoot to the Temple of Ra. The priests are surprised. The High Sun Priest, a waxy man with perfect teeth and an unsettlingly smooth voice, asks if you'd like to be accompanied. You decline. You step into the sanctuary alone. Outside, the city is blinding with noise and heat, but in here it's hushed. The temperature drops as you pass through the pillared halls, where giant statues of Ra rise from the shadows like sleeping giants. You light a single oil lamp and place it before the statue, Ra in falcon-headed form, with the sun disk glowing faintly on his crown. You sit, and then you wait. You wait for an answer, a sign, a voice, anything. You listen to your own heartbeat echoing in the stone. You try to pray. You try to empty your thoughts. You try to think about all you've done. The reforms, the pyramid, the victories, the compromises. You ask yourself, is this what a god would have done? The silence is unbearable. After what feels like hours, you leave. No message, no warmth, just the cold feeling of having spoken into a well too deep to hear your own voice bounce back. That night you can't sleep again, so you return the next day, and the next. You start calling them vigils, though no one joins you. You light the same lamp. You ask different questions. You bring small offerings, dates, papyrus flowers, polished stones. You receive nothing in return, just silence. One night, after yet another empty vigil, you lie awake in your chambers and ask yourself the unthinkable. What if they're not real? Not just Ra, not just Ptah or Thoth or Anubis, all of them. What if the gods are just statues and rituals and stories repeated until everyone forgot they were stories? You panic. Not outwardly, of course. On the outside, you're still the same poised figure, divinely guided, perfectly composed, spiritually radiant. But inside, your soul is pacing in circles. You bring it up here, delicately, to your vizier. Have you ever questioned them, you ask, pretending to talk about omens? He meets your eyes for a long time, then says, doubt is the ember that keeps the fire alive. You're allowed to wonder, just never do it with your mouth open. Cryptic, infuriating, helpful, but the doubt doesn't leave, it festers. And the more vigils you hold, the more you realise how much depends on silence. The gods never speak, but everyone acts like they do. You start to notice how many divine messages require the interpretation of priests, how many visions just happen to support temple expansion or increased offerings. You realise that for being said to be all-powerful, the gods are curiously reliant on administrative paperwork. You begin to play a game. During your next vigil, you ask for a sign, something obvious. You say out loud, if you want me to raise taxes for the temple, knock over that bowl. Nothing happens. You leave. The priests later tell you the gods whispered their approval of your leadership. Convenient? You start testing them more. You stage minor errors in ritual, offering a single flower instead of 3, delaying the incense. Nothing happens, no earthquakes, no plagues. The sun still rises, the Nile still flows. You feel two things at once, terrified and free. Then something strange happens. You dream of Ra. Not the way he's depicted in temples, majestic, falcon-headed, aloof, but human, tired. Weathered, sitting on a stone bench beside you, rubbing his temples like he's had too many worshippers and not enough sleep. He looks at you and says, "You're doing the best you can." Then he vanishes. You wake up in tears. Is it real? Is your mind cracking under pressure? Or was that the closest thing to divinity you'll ever experience? A version of a god you can actually believe in? The priests grow concerned about your late-night temple visits. They start asking questions. One implies gently that private communication with the gods should be mediated through them. You tell him the gods don't seem to mind your solitude. He does not smile. You know you're pushing boundaries. But at this point, what's left? You've conquered armies, built monuments, crushed rebellion, played God. You've worn the mask so long that your real face has forgotten how to blink in the sun. Now you just want something real, even if it's just a quiet no. One afternoon, while in vigil, you feel something, not a voice, not a miracle, just stillness, not empty, not hostile, just presence, like the air around the statue is aware of you, and that's enough. It has to be. Historical fact. Pharaohs frequently visited temples to engage in private rituals, especially at temples dedicated to solar gods like Ra. Fringe fact. Some ancient records describe visions of gods in human form, often weary, ambiguous and cryptic, far from the divine perfection of temple carvings. Debated idea, were the gods of Egypt genuinely believed to be real entities, or were they seen as symbolic forces mediated by priesthoods for social cohesion? The Nile doesn't ask permission. It rises, or it doesn't. It floods the fields, or it sulks in its bed like a bored god. And when it sulks too long, everything breaks. First the farmers complain, then the temple offerings shrink, then the market prices double, and suddenly Tzutzis, you, the most powerful man in Egypt, are being quietly blamed for a river's mood. It starts with a late flood, a small thing at first. The priests say it's within the bounds of divine testing. The astronomers say the stars predicted a delay. You nod and pretend to believe both even though your gut is already knotting. You've been pharaoh long enough to know when something's off. And this feels off. Weeks pass, the river creeps higher but not high enough. The floodplain remains dry. The irrigation channels that normally dance with water by now are dusty snakes curling through cracked earth. Villagers begin building tiny shrines near the riverbank, offering fish bones and dyed feathers. One group sacrifices a goat without asking permission. A farmer drowns himself in service to the flood. The priests quickly spin it as a noble gesture. You see it for what it is, desperation in a loincloth. The whispers come next. They slither through the court like smoke. That the gods are displeased, that your last decree insulted Ma'at, that you married the wrong sister, that your dreams are false, your pyramid cursed, your heart unclean. No one says it outright. They don't have to. The silence at dinner speaks volumes. The way people start saying, "May the gods continue to favour the king," with just a hint of side-eye. You've never hated passive aggression more. You increase offerings to Happy, the Nile god. You double the incense, triple the wine. You even authorize the ceremonial drowning of 5 clay crocodiles painted gold and stuffed with grain. The priests say it's a symbolic act to entice the real Nile. You start to wonder if they just made that up this morning. Still, the water doesn't rise. Your people begin rationing. Bread lines grow. Grain stores shrink. You quietly release a reserve shipment from the royal granary, meant for emergencies only. You don't announce it publicly, you let the rumours carry it instead. The pharaoh feeds the hungry. It works for a time. Then the temple donations stop. This is when you realise how fragile the system really is. The temples rely on public offerings, the public relies on grain relies on water, and water relies on nobody, apparently. The great cosmic balance, more like a series of bets placed on a river with commitment issues. The high priest of Amun requests a formal meeting. He wears ceremonial blue. Mouth pursed like a man preparing to accuse you without using your name, he opens with flattery, then transitions smoothly into concern. The gods are patient, he says, but they do not ignore imbalance. You stare at him across the dais, sunlight streaking through the columns like prison bars. And who, you ask, decides what counts as imbalance? He bows, not answering. You decide to take control of the narrative. If the gods are silent, then you will speak for them. You announce that the Nile's delay is not punishment, but transition, a time of reflection, a divine pause before renewal. You recite a made-up prophecy that references a season of waiting and the hush before the surge. You make it sound beautiful. People want to believe it. You can see it in their tired eyes, but belief doesn't water crops. Soon nobles begin stockpiling food. Grain prices triple. A caravan carrying barley to the south is raided, not by bandits, but by starving villagers. The The commander spares the offenders, citing divine empathy. You demote him quietly. Compassion is lovely, but you need order right now. The most dangerous moment comes when a group of farmers marches to the palace gates. Not violently, not even angrily, just desperate. Faces hollow, sandals worn, eyes begging without words. They offer you a woven basket filled with dry sill and cracked frog bones. A message, clear as crystal. The land has stopped listening. You accept the offering with reverence, then order it buried in the temple garden. Symbolic rebirth. You need the message to be hope, not protest. That night you walk to the edge of the palace garden where the irrigation channels sit bone dry. You kneel, you touch the dirt. You say nothing, because there's nothing to say. You are the living god of Egypt and you cannot command a river. Then the rain comes, not in torrents, not in glory, just a steady trickle in the darkness. Barely enough to settle the dust, but it's something. You lift your face and let it soak your lips. Your robes darken. Somewhere behind you a servant gasps. By morning the river begins to rise. Not enough to save everything, but enough to give people something to hold on to. The next day the priests declare the Pharaoh's vigil brought divine tears from the sky. Your face is carved beside Hapi in a temple mural within the week. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry. Historical fact, the success of Nile flooding directly impacted public perception of the Pharaoh's divine favour and legitimacy. Fringe fact, in severe droughts, ritual acts such as flooding models of the Nile or drowning sacrificial figurines were believed to persuade the gods. Debated point. Did Egyptian rulers actually influence temple messages about floods, or were priesthoods fully in control of public interpretation? Evidence is murky. Your vizier has always been quiet. That's part of the appeal. While the priests chant and the generals argue and the court poets compose flattering metaphors about your nose, he just watches. Listens. Sometimes you wonder if he ever blinks. He's been by your side since your early days on the throne, an inherited appointment technically, but he's made himself indispensable, which is more dangerous than any title. At first, his silence was a comfort. In a palace full of noise and performance, having someone who didn't speak unless it mattered felt like a gift. He never overstepped, never flattered too much. He brought you clear reports, made efficient decisions, and executed your orders with absolute precision. But over the years, you've begun to notice something else. He always knows what's going to happen, before you do. When there's a riot in the southern provinces, he has a grain shipment already en route. When the priests complain about improper burial funding, he's already reorganized the temple's stipends. When you once mentioned the idea of reforming the scribal ranks, he presented a list of names within the hour, marked for promotion, exile, or quiet retirement. It should be reassuring. Instead, it makes your spine itch. Now, with the Nile still rising too slowly and the court growing restless again, he seems omnipresent. Not in a divine way, in a bureaucratic way, which is somehow more terrifying. He appears behind you during stressful meetings, finishes your sentences before you do, offers options you hadn't even voiced aloud. He says it's preparation. You start calling it anticipation, quietly to yourself. You try to probe him, lightly, casually. "Tell me," you say one afternoon, lounging in the sun-dappled antechamber, "have you ever considered ruling?" He doesn't blink. "I already do, Your Majesty." It's a joke. Probably. You laugh. Probably. The truth is, no one knows more than he does, not even the High Priest. He has access to every report, every intercepted scroll, every whisper that passes through the palace. His scribes outnumber your guards. His informants span every ministry. There's a rumour, one you can't confirm but can't dismiss, that he once had a general executed using an outdated law no one else remembered existed. You begin testing him. You give vague orders just to see how he interprets them. He always guesses your intention. You try misdirecting him, asking questions about things you don't care about. The next day he's already solved problems you hadn't even decided were problems. It's like playing Senet with someone who always moves first. You hold a private meeting with your personal steward, one of the few you still trust completely. You ask him to trace the vizier's daily movements, discreetly. Within 3 days, your steward vanishes. His sandals are found in the lotus pond. The official word is drowned while meditating. You order a small tomb built in his honour. You say nothing else. From that day forward, the vizier never mentions the steward. But he begins bringing you wine himself. You start noticing how many decisions are made before you're consulted. Not just minor things, tax adjustments, temple repairs, border patrol schedules, but foreign policy. You find out by accident that a trade deal has been brokered with a Libyan caravan through a coastal contact you didn't even know existed. When you confront the vizier, he shrugs. It was in your name. That's when you realise the full scope of it. He's not replacing you. He's replicating you, creating a version of you that he can deploy as needed. Silent, obedient, politically ideal. You're not sure if it's flattery or a slow-motion coup, and the worst part? It's effective. The empire runs better this way. Your people are fed, your borders are stable. The gods receive their offerings on time. The court believes you are more powerful than ever. You just don't feel like you anymore. One night, alone in your study, you review a scroll he delivered. Summary of Royal Sentiment, Eastern Provinces. It includes things you haven't even said yet. A tax decree you were thinking about. A rumour you almost started. You flip to the back. There's a small note, handwritten in neat script. It reads, "We are safest when your shadow moves before your feet. You don't sleep that night. The next day you try to reassert control. You issue new orders, direct ones, without passing them through his channels. You call surprise meetings, visit provinces unannounced. You even pull a scribe off duty to promote him directly, bypassing the vizier's recommendations. Within a week, that scribe resigns, citing health reasons. He moves to a monastery on the edge of the desert and is never seen again. The vizier never confronts you, never scolds, never denies. He simply adjusts, subtly. You start noticing your meetings run a few minutes shorter. You get more rest, fewer scrolls, fewer problems. It's like he's gently reminding you that he's not the enemy. You're just very tired. And maybe, just maybe, he's the only one who actually understands what this job costs. And part of you believes him. Which might be the most dangerous thing of all. Historical fact, the ancient Egyptian vizier, or Djeti, was effectively the pharaoh's right hand, overseeing administration, justice, taxation, and daily operations. Fringe fact, some viziers were rumoured to have private archives even the pharaoh couldn't access. Encrypted records written in symbolic script. Debated idea, did pharaohs truly wield all the power, or were viziers the quiet architects of Egypt's golden ages? Some scholars suggest the vizier role eclipsed royal power more often than acknowledged. No one tells you what to do with dead pharaohs, not the bodies. Those are handled with all the ceremony and linen they deserve. You've attended enough embalming rituals to know the routine. Remove the brain through the nose, preserve the liver and heart, tuck the intestines in little painted jars and wrap the body layer by layer until it looks like a very expensive bedsheet sculpture. That part's easy. Ritual, predictable, everyone knows their role. It's what comes after that no one wants to talk about. You feel it first after your father's death. The way his name lingers in the halls. The way his face still stares down at you from stone columns and mural walls, painted with that serene, godly smile. At first, it's comforting, a reminder. Then it starts to feel heavier, like a presence, or worse, an opinion. You hear him in your head sometimes, not as a ghost, exactly, just a voice you can't unlearn. When you hesitate before a decree, he's there. Decisiveness is divine. When you falter in ritual, precision is protection. When you feel the court slipping from your fingers, they must never see your fear. And maybe it's your imagination, maybe it's stress. But then the dreams start. They always begin the same way. You're walking through a columned hallway, the light dim and golden, like the inside of a lantern. The walls are covered in hieroglyphs, but the words rearrange as you read them, slipping through your grasp like wet sand. You come to a throne, and he's there. Your father. Alive or something like it. His skin looks like papyrus, dried and painted. His eyes are open, and every time he says the same thing, you're not done. You wake up soaked in sweat, your heart galloping like a chariot. You don't tell anyone about these dreams, especially not the priests. Because if they think your father is reaching out from the doer, the realm of the dead, they'll start meddling, hold rituals, interpret signs, ask questions, and the last thing you need is a religious crisis sparked by your midnight panic attacks. But you're not the only one haunted. In the temples you notice the older priests speaking of past pharaohs in present tense. He commands, they say. He watches. You ask which pharaoh they mean. They smile and change the subject. At court, scribes still reference decrees made by rulers long gone, treating them as foundational truths, unchangeable, unquestionable. Your decrees, by contrast, are treated as suggestions. You can't help but notice. You attend a festival in honour of Youre, long dead, long deified. His pyramid is a pilgrimage site now, the step pyramid rising out of the sand like a broken stairway to the afterlife. The people leave offerings at its base. Priests chant his name. Children are named after him. You stand in the shadow of his monument, and for the first time you feel small. Not metaphorically, physically. He looms, not as a man, but as a legacy. Afterward, you ask your sculptors to revise your own funerary plans. Make your name larger, your statues taller. Not out of vanity, you tell yourself, but survival. You're beginning to understand something terrible and true. Death is not the end of your reign, it's the beginning of your reputation. The real danger of dead pharaohs isn't that they're gone, it's that they still compete with you. You're constantly being measured against men whose flaws have been erased by time, their victories inflated, their failures buried. Your advisors quote them, your priests compare your omens to theirs, your people mutter things like, "Ah, in the time of Amenemhat the fields were never bare." You know for a fact that Amenemhat faced 3 famines and 1 locust plague. But his statues don't mention that. You begin to suspect the dead are better at ruling than the living. And then there are the omens. A statue of your father is found cracked down the middle, split from shoulder to waist. A tremor? Erosion? A message? The high priest says it's a sign that your connection to the divine lineage needs reinforcement. You suspect it's just poor craftsmanship. You order the statue repaired anyway, but you replace the inscription with a new one. He who honours the past must surpass it. It doesn't go unnoticed. That night, someone leaves a canopic jar outside your chamber door. Empty, symbolic, maybe a joke, maybe a warning. You don't find it funny. You start spending more time in the tomb workshops, reviewing progress, making changes, not just to your own tomb, but to those of your predecessors. Quiet edits, not erasures, just clarifications. You soften their glory, increase your own, you rationalize it. History is flexible. That's the point of stone, it stays where you put it. And still, the dreams come, you're in the hallway again. The writing writhes, the throne waits. But this time there's more than one figure. A line of them stretching into the darkness. All pharaohs, all watching. Their faces are masks, indistinguishable, and yet you feel their judgment like heat. You try to speak, you can't, you wake up gasping. You order another statue commissioned, one of you, not as Horus, but as a judge, stern, towering, holding the scales of Ma'at. You place it near your council chamber. You want everyone to walk past it before they speak. You want the dead to walk past it too. Historical fact, pharaohs often venerated their predecessors, but also subtly rewrote history to enhance their own status and legacy. Fringe fact, some tombs show evidence of deliberate alterations centuries after the pharaoh's death, suggesting later rulers edited the past. Debated issue. Did later dynasties genuinely believe in the spiritual presence of former pharaohs? Or was ancestor worship used as a political tool to justify new regimes? You march to war mostly because you're expected to. The trouble starts far to the south in the region beyond Nubia, a cluster of tribal leaders suddenly refusing to pay tribute. The reports come in vague and conflicting, a caravan attacked, an envoy insulted, temples defaced. No one agrees on the details, only that something must be done, and by something they mean you. After all, what kind of god-king lets his borderlands disobey without divine retribution? You're tired. You've already outlived 2 plagues, 1 famine, a Templar uprising, and at least 1 assassination attempt. But nothing says unified Egypt like marching into a place most people can't point to on a map and planting your standard in the sand. The court praises your courage. The generals sharpen their spears. The people cheer for a victory they assume is already guaranteed. It feels like theatre, but the kind where the actors forget their lines and the set catches fire. Your army is formidable, at least on paper. Hundreds of chariots, thousands of infantry, and a logistics train so long it needs its own festival to keep morale up. You ride at the front in a chariot gilded with gold and adorned with falcon feathers, your armour gleaming in the sunlight. Behind you drums thunder, standards wave. You look like the god of conquest himself. Inside, your stomach churns. War is dirtier than the murals ever admit. The heat is unbearable, the insects relentless, and the desert unforgiving. After just 3 days, the rear units are already complaining about spoiled rations and camel lice. Your generals try to keep discipline with threats and rationing. You try to keep your composure by staring into the horizon, like it's going to offer you a shortcut to glory. Eventually you reach the contested region. A series of rocky hills, dry riverbeds and half-built fortresses. Your scouts return with the expected news. The rebels are more scattered than united. Small bands of warriors armed with stone-tipped spears, hiding among cliffside caves. Not exactly a well-oiled army, but they know the land, and they hate you. You send a formal message offering peace, tribute in exchange for loyalty. You even phrase it nicely. Their reply arrives nailed to the side of your camp's water wagon. It's a goat's head with your name carved into the tongue. So you go to war. Your soldiers are ready. They've trained for this. And at first it goes well. You burn a few rebel camps, reclaim a trade post, even capture a minor tribal chief who insists you're cursed. But then the terrain begins to fight back. The heat melts your bowstrings. Sand clogs your supply carts. The enemy refuses to meet you in the open, choosing instead to pick off your scouts and vanish like ghosts into the rocks. After 2 weeks, your forces are exhausted. Tempers fray. You begin receiving nightly reports of men deserting, slipping away during patrols, often leaving behind only footprints and empty flasks. Morale plummets. The priests travelling with you start talking about divine misalignment. You start wondering if this campaign was a mistake, and then your chariot breaks. Not metaphorically, literally. The axle snaps mid-march, sending you sprawling into the sand. You aren't hurt, but your pride takes a blow that echoes like a gong. The image of the unshakable Pharaoh sprawled in the dust spreads faster than fire. By sundown, the rumour is that Ra himself turned his face from you. Your generals insist you ride in a covered palanquin from now on. You agree, mostly to stop the whispers. You decide to stage a final show of power, a major assault on the largest rebel stronghold. You gather your remaining forces and strike at dawn, banners raised, horns blaring. The battle is brutal, not glorious, just ugly. Stone meets bronze, sand turns to mud with blood. The rebels fight like demons. You win, but barely. Your army loses too many. Your general loses an eye. You lose whatever illusions you had left about heroism. After the dust settles, you burn the enemy fortress. You raise a new monument, a simple obelisk inscribed with a stylized version of events. It shows you smiting chaos, standing alone on a hill of victory. No mention of the casualties, no mention of the broken chariot. History will be cleaner than truth. You return to the capital thinner, dirtier, and with one more statue to add to your growing collection of divine triumphs. The people greet you with cheers, flowers, hymns. They never ask for details. The murals are already being painted. Later you sit in your bath, staring at your bruised knees and sunburned arms, and you wonder if the real victory was just surviving. Or maybe it's convincing everyone else that you did more than that. Your vizier says, "The land is satisfied, the gods are content." You nod, though you don't believe either. Historical fact: Egyptian pharaohs led campaigns into Nubia and further south, often to reinforce tribute or punish rebellious territories. Fringe fact: some battlefield hieroglyphs feature pharaohs single-handedly defeating entire armies, an artistic exaggeration with zero basis in observed reality. Debated issue: did pharaohs truly lead in battle, or were their war roles largely ceremonial? Scholars remain divided, especially for late New Kingdom rulers. They come to you one morning, not armed, not angry, not even loud, just tired. The pyramid workers, the same men who've been carving your afterlife from limestone for 20 years. They shuffle into the palace courtyard in silence, dusty robes clinging to sweat-slicked backs, hands cracked and bleeding from years of hauling, chipping, lifting, repeating. One carries a tablet, another carries a dried-out fig. A gesture maybe, an insult, maybe both. You're told it's not a revolt exactly, more of a complaint. A slow-motion rebellion where the tools are dropped instead of drawn. No chisels, no carts, no movement, just stillness wrapped in fatigue. Your advisors meet this with a familiar script. Blame the overseers, increase punishments, decrease rations, but you've seen enough real rebellions to recognize the danger here. These aren't soldiers, these are men with no more fear left to give. That's worse. A man afraid of you can still be controlled. A man who's already given up? That's chaos in human form. You summon their representative, a foreman named Dedu with skin like smoked leather and a limp from a collapsed scaffold 2 summers ago. He bows shallowly, eyes level with yours. The usual distance between ruler and ruled is missing. He speaks plainly. There is no food. You nod. He continues. Our children cannot eat copper. Our wives cannot eat stone. The pyramid is for your eternity. We need bread today. You don't interrupt. That part is important. Let them speak. Let them burn it off. You've found that silence does more than power ever will. When he finishes, you dismiss him with a promise to review conditions. He doesn't bow on the way out, just turns and limps away. You spend that evening walking alone through the garden. The same stone bench, the same lotus pond, the same birdsong. None of it helps. You think about Dedu, about the pyramid, about the promises you've made to a future you'll never see. Built on the backs of people who are starving right now, it was always the deal. Suffering in life for glory and death, but somehow that's starting to sound less noble and more pitiful. The next day you do the unthinkable. You visit the worksite, not in your golden chariot, not surrounded by armed guards, just a modest litter, a thin veil across your face and a retinue of confused priests who whisper among themselves. The workers freeze when they see you. Some drop their tools, some stare. Dedu steps forward again, this time with no limp. You suspect it was never as bad as he made it seem. Smart man. You walk the perimeter. The air is thick with chalk dust and mistrust. You see men sleeping in half-collapsed tents. Water jugs empty. A small child, someone's daughter, picking up bits of discarded bread crusts from the sand. You smell urine and old blood and the sharp tang of resin from the funerary chamber being prepared deep inside the monument. You smile, not kindly, not cruelly, just enough to be remembered. That evening you authorise a delivery of emergency rations, barley, lentils, beer, cloth for new sandals. You cancel the next 3 workdays and declare a festival in honour of the workers' devotion to Me'at. Could you even visit the god's shrine at the worksite and offer a personal prayer for their strength? All of it is done publicly, loudly, ritualistically. Not because you're generous, because you're practical. You still want that pyramid finished. You hear the priests muttering later that night, that the gods never asked for mercy, that your kindness weakens your divinity. You ignore them, let them think you're soft, let them say it in whispers, while you sleep in a bed carved from cedar and they chant for better harvests to statues that have never lifted a hand. But then the second strike happens. 2 months later, the transport crew refuses to move stone blocks from the quarry. No reason given, just silence. You know it's not about food this time. It's about power. They've tasted something, not victory, not equality, but relevance. They want to know they matter. You could crush it. You could execute the ringleaders, put their heads on pikes, and finish the pyramid with terrified obedience. It would work. For a while. Instead, you do something far worse. You negotiate. You meet again with Dedu, this time in your private court. You offer him a position. Supervisor of Labour Affairs. A made-up title with just enough influence to feel real. He accepts, carefully. He knows the leash is gold, but it's still a leash. And just like that, the strike ends, quietly. The work resumes, the pyramid rises. You build a chapel on the site, dedicated to Ptah, god of craftsmen. You have your own likeness carved into the foundation stone, not as a warrior or god, but as a builder holding a chisel. You're not fooling anyone, but you're rewriting the story as you go. People will remember that you ruled with justice, that you listened, that you built not just with stone, but with the blood and breath of your people, and that you gave something back. Or at least that's what the inscriptions will say. Historical fact. The Deir el-Medina workers' strike during the reign of Ramses III is the first recorded labour strike in history. Workers stopped construction on royal tombs due to lack of payment and food. Fringe fact. Some workers left behind graffiti inside tombs, mocking their overseers or bragging about their craftsmanship. Debated issue. Were pharaohs truly unaware of workers' conditions, or was divine distance a convenient excuse to ignore their suffering? Scholars are split. You should have known medicine in your time wouldn't be comforting. From the moment you develop your first mysterious cough, a wet, a rattling sound that doesn't quite go away, you start receiving treatments that seem better suited to embalming than healing. The court physicians arrive quickly, of course, eager, reeking of myrrh and wet linen. You half expect them to unroll you on a slab and start stuffing onions into your ribcage. Instead, they press your chest, sniff your breath, and announce solemnly, "The pharaoh is under spiritual pressure," which is a nice way of saying we have no idea what's going on. They begin with the basics, purging rituals, You're given a blend of castor oil, mashed dates, and what might have been powdered shell. You drink it. You regret drinking it. You regret everything. For 2 days, your stomach gurgles like an angry canal. You're assured it's working, you are not assured. Then come the amulets. You're draped in them like a ceremonial tree. Copper for the lungs, gold for vitality, turquoise for divine alignment. One of the priests insists on placing a beetle amulet beneath your tongue. To whisper to your breath, he says with absolute seriousness. You spit it out after he leaves. Your sister wife suggests a more refined treatment, a sacred fumigation. You're locked in a heated chamber filled with burning herbs, juniper, frankincense, crushed lotus, and told to breathe deeply. You do until your eyes water and your lungs scream. When you emerge, the priests call your tears cleansing. You call it suffocation. Your hair starts thinning. You tell yourself it's the incense. The stress, the weight of the crown, it's not age. Can't be. You're still young enough to mount a chariot, aren't you? Then again, your joints say otherwise. Climbing stairs now feels like a small war. You begin noticing tremors in your hands, sudden fevers, shortness of breath. You tell no one. And then someone suggests mercury. Not symbolically, actual mercury. The priest-physician claims it purifies the blood. That a few drops, when mixed with fig sap and drunk before dawn, can restore balance to your inner keshi. You ask if he's tried it himself. He bows, says no, but assures you the gods recommend it. You send him away. Later, you learn he tested it on 3 goats. One danced, one died, one exploded. You stop asking about goat trials. But the thing is, you're getting worse. Your voice rasps. You cough up dark flecks into your linen. You feel cold even under the sun. The temple painters start drawing your likeness with slightly puffier cheeks, a more serene expression, a little less detail in the eyes. You notice. Your physicians hold emergency conferences. They argue over causes, bad spirits, an imbalance in your care, a worm in your gut that's also a metaphor. One proposes bloodletting using leeches trained to recognize divine impurities. You begin to suspect none of them have a clue. Or worse, they do, but aren't allowed to say it. In desperation, you visit a fringe healer from the Delta, a woman with eyes like broken glass and a mouth that never stops moving. She doesn't bow, doesn't ask for your name, just presses a hand to your chest, mutters a prayer and says, "Too much cadence in the lungs. You've been breathing other people's lies too long." It's nonsense, but it's the first thing anyone said that feels even remotely true. She gives you a tincture made of crushed hibiscus, honey, and what she won't name. Tastes like burnt sugar and copper. You drink it. And for a while the coughing stops. That night you sleep, really sleep. No dreams, no jackal-headed gods, just darkness and breath. You wake up with tears in your eyes. Not from pain, but because you'd forgotten what peace felt like. But of course it doesn't last. The cough returns a week later, this time sharper, deeper. Your muscles ache. Your gums bleed when you brush them with salt. You stop attending morning rituals. You cancel appearances. You let your sister wife lead the new moon ceremony. She looks radiant, terrifying. Whispers begin. That the Pharaoh is in retreat. That your illness is divine punishment, or worse, mortal decay. Some say the gods are testing your purity. Others say your car is being drained by the restless souls of the pyramid workers. A few suggest curses from rivals buried with unfinished revenge. The Anubis priests are suspiciously quiet. In your fever, you begin to believe some of it. You start preparing for death, not publicly, but in your own quiet ways. You review your tomb plans again, add an extra chamber. You ask for the names of those who will perform your opening of the mouth ceremony. You even compose a small hymn to be carved on your sarcophagus lid. I ruled in silence, I breathed in flame, I leave behind shadows who know my name. One night in your haze, you try to write your will. Halfway through you realize you don't know who you trust. The vizier? Too calculated. Your wife? Too ambitious. Your children? Too young. Your gods? Still silent. You burn the will. And yet, in the mornings, you still rise. You dress. You stand. You attend court with coal under your eyes to mask the hollows. You speak in a calm voice and wear the golden collar like a shield. Because the Pharaoh is eternal. And if you pretend hard enough, maybe the gods will agree. Historical fact, Egyptian medicine blended herbal remedies, magic and spiritual diagnosis. Many physicians served both practical and religious roles. Fringe fact, mercury was used in ancient healing practices despite its toxicity. believed to ward off evil or restore purity. Debated issue. How much of a pharaoh's health was kept secret from the public? Some argue physical weakness was seen as spiritual weakness, and thus hidden at all costs. The harem is a kingdom within a kingdom. From the outside it looks serene. Orchards, fountains, linen curtains swaying in the breeze. Inside, it's a battlefield where smiles are weapons and perfume is a kind of armour. You enter it less as a man and more as a symbol, a prize, an ambition wrapped in gold and obligation. And every woman inside it knows exactly what you're worth. You didn't build the harem yourself, it grew around you, an inevitable extension of your crown. Some of its women arrived in parade litters, veiled and jewelled, daughters of foreign kings sent with careful smiles and subtle terms of alliance. Others were born here. Noble families offering their daughters as a sign of loyalty or to gain a foothold in the marble-floored game of power by proximity. A few chose this life, most had no choice. Your great royal wife, still your sister, still a force of nature, rules the harem in name, but that name is stretched thin across dozens of courtyards, bathhouses, tutors and chambers where gossip flows like warm honey. You suspect she only pretends to control it. Even gods have limits. At first, it was flattering. So many women vying for your time, your favour, your attention, but you learned quickly it's not about you. It's about influence, access, proximity to the throne. A glance from you means a family's fortune. A whisper means a cousin's promotion. A single visit, just one evening in one chamber, and a new alliance is born. And it's not just the women, it's their handlers, their mothers, their former tutors, their servants. The eunuchs who know everyone's routines and everyone's secrets. The senior attendants who arrange accidental meetings near the fish pond. The court musicians who know which melody makes you linger outside a certain room. Everyone plays the game. You keep a mental list of names. The ones who watch you too closely. The ones who ask too little. The ones who never ask anything at all. Those are the ones you worry about. One girl once told you she dreamt of a falcon landing on your chest, pecking at your heart until it bled honey. You didn't sleep with her. You had her reassigned to a temple school. She thanked you with a riddle carved into a soapstone. A gift not touched cannot be stolen. You still don't know what she meant. Some of the women become favourites, not lovers necessarily, but trusted eyes. One is an amateur scribe who copies hymns in her free time. Another knows 7 languages and corrects your pronunciation when you speak to foreign envoys. One sings lullabies you've never heard before and never want to forget. You begin to understand why some pharaohs wrote poems for their concubines. It isn't always lust. Sometimes it's survival. But with affection comes danger. Affection creates sides. Sides form factions. Factions start whisper campaigns. One woman accuses another of poisoning her date wine. Another spreads a rumour that the great wife's latest pregnancy was not yours. You begin assigning guards to the harem, not just to protect the women, but to protect each other from each other. Eventually the politics spill over. A powerful noble's daughter, 18, poised, terrifying, gains your attention. You visit her chamber 3 times. Her father suddenly has opinions about grain taxes. The high priest casually mentions improper influence. Your wife says nothing but arranges a temple dedication in her own name that week, and makes sure it includes the noble's family name nowhere. You start scheduling your visits through an intermediary. A scribe who writes the invitations as poetry. It becomes ritualized. A system of balance, like lunar phases. But even then, your choices ripple through the court like dropped stones. Every smile has a weight. Every kiss leaves a mark, and then someone disappears. A young woman, recently arrived from the western provinces, barely 16, bright eyes, soft hands. You spoke to her once in the orchard. She quoted a poem you didn't know. The next morning she was gone, her chamber stripped, her name absent from the registry. The guards say she was reassigned. The head of harem security says she left voluntarily. Your sister says nothing at all. You don't push, not directly, but you ask your vizier for a full list of movements in the palace that night. He brings it. No explanation. Just numbers, names, footsteps marked on stone. You find the girl's name. You also find the name of one of your wife's closest attendants walking in the same corridor not long after. You make no accusations, but the next week your wife finds a gift in her chamber. A mirror polished from desert glass. Carved into the back are the words, "Even the moon must reflect the sun, and she doesn't speak to you for a month." You begin spending less time in the harem. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's exhausting. Every gesture costs something. Every moment echoes. And you've started to feel like a statue that keeps being dragged from one room to another and dressed in different outfits. You still visit, of course, for appearance, for diplomacy, for comfort, when the nights are long and the gods are quiet. But the days of pleasure without paranoia are over. And yet, in all the chaos, some small beauty remains. You sit once beside the garden pool while one of the women, an old companion by now, plays a reed flute. The sound is simple, low, breathy. Not meant to seduce or impress, just a melody for dusk. And in that moment you remember what it felt like to not be Pharaoh. Just a boy in a courtyard listening to music, trying to understand the world. Historical fact, royal harems in ancient Egypt were not just for pleasure, but were political hubs, often involving noble-born women tied to alliances and diplomacy. Fringe fact, some harems operated with their own hierarchies and budgets, almost like self-contained courts complete with spies, rivalries and records. Debated point, was the harem a gilded prison, or a space of agency and influence for royal women? Modern scholars argue both sides depending on the dynasty and sources. One day a leopard arrives at your palace. Not metaphorically, an actual leopard, thick-furred and golden-eyed, padding silently from a gilded cage carried by 6 sweating servants. It's a gift from Babylon. The letter accompanying it is written in perfect hieratic, praising your divine rule and offering friendship in the form of a creature as rare and fierce as the pharaoh's spirit. You read it twice, then you look at the leopard, who seems unimpressed by the symbolism. It's not the first gift you have received from foreign rulers, and it won't be the last. Diplomatic tokens arrive almost daily. Rare spices, gold bowls, bolts of cloth dyed in ways your weavers can't replicate. Strange animals in pens and baskets. There was a monkey last month that screamed like a demon. A tortoise from the Hittites that supposedly lives 100 years. A carved ivory game board from some island you can't even find on the map. All tokens of goodwill. All wrapped in messages that sound like praise but read like chess moves. The leopard is placed in the royal menagerie, a collection that now rivals some provinces in size and cost. You visit it sometimes, alone at dusk. There's something soothing about watching creatures that aren't trying to impress you. The gazelles blink dumbly. The birds scream nonsense. The crocodile stares like it remembers you from a past life. But the leopard is different. She paces. She watches. She waits. You begin to wonder what else came with her, because it's not just gifts arriving. It's people. Ambassadors, traders, foreign scribes who ask too many questions and take too many notes. A diplomat from Mitanni gifts you a scroll, sealed in wax, translated from the tongue of the gods. It's mostly political poetry, full of metaphors about mirrored rivers and kingdoms joined in sunlight. But tucked near the end is a line that catches your eye. Let us know you as your enemies never shall. You read it 3 times before locking it in a box. Your guards report unfamiliar faces in the markets, men who speak your language with a strange accent, asking about grain stores and temple routines. A cartographer from the Levant offers to map your inner palace in precise divine proportion. You thank him and assign him to a village near the desert border. A few months later, he vanishes in a sandstorm. Or maybe something else. Even your court feels infected. One of your trusted servants starts receiving extra parcels, simple things sealed in foreign script. When confronted, he swears they're gifts for his mother. You allow him to keep his tongue but not his position. You begin to suspect every gift contains a riddle, that nothing arrives here without strings. A basket of figs from the Levant contains a scroll of pressed prayers. A Hittite tapestry depicts a falcon locked in battle with a wolf. You wonder which one you're meant to be. A set of silver cups from Mycenae is engraved with symbols no one can read. Your wife thinks they're just decorative. You think they're a cipher. The paranoia settles in your bones like old Zoro's smoke. You hold a private audience with your vizier. You ask, "Are we being watched?" He doesn't hesitate. "We are always being watched, Your Majesty." "But more than usual?" He shrugs. "Perhaps, but who's watching who?" You don't sleep well that night. Eventually you order a review of every foreign gift in the palace. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet audit. Your guards comb through scrolls, weigh incense blocks, test pottery for the poisons. You even have a priest perform purification rituals over the leopard, who glares at him as if she's considering her odds. They find nothing obvious, but the mood changes. The next time a diplomatic gift arrives, a pearl-studded fan from the east, you feel your courtiers tense. The messenger bows lower than necessary. The high priest mutters a blessing under his breath that includes 3 gods who haven't been invoked in decades. You begin making gifts of your own. You send sacred scarabs to the Hittite king, each inscribed with your name and a veiled reminder of your divine lineage. You send a falcon statue to Babylon, hollowed and filled with desert sand, a gesture the priests claim represents the stillness of shared vision. You just like that it looks harmless and means nothing. Your wife gets involved. She hosts a banquet for the Mitanni envoy, dresses in silver linen, recites an ancient song of peace from memory. The envoy leaves pale and shaken. You never ask what she said to him, but still, the gifts keep coming. One morning you receive a carved obsidian mirror from the Levant. You look into it and don't see yourself, just shadow. You lock it in the treasury, but the memory clings. Later, in the Temple of Thoth, you dream of the leopard again. She speaks this time with your voice. Everything you receive you owe. You wake up sweating, your throat raw. You consider sending her back, but then you realise that's the point. You can't return gifts, only respond to them, and every response costs something. Historical fact: diplomatic gift exchanges were common in Egypt's New Kingdom, especially with powers like Babylon, Hattis and Mitanni, often as part of complex alliances and political manoeuvring. Fringe fact: some Egyptian rulers were known to hollow out gifts, like statues and incense containers, to hide messages, spells, or even their poisons. Debated issue: were these gift exchanges purely ceremonial, or were they part of an intricate web of espionage, influence, and soft power? Scholars are increasingly exploring the latter. You tried to be a poet once? It seems harmless enough. After all, every pharaoh claims divine inspiration. You've been called beloved of the gods since you were old enough to sit upright in a chair without tipping over. So why not speak like one? Not just in decrees and rituals, but with feeling, with elegance, with the weight of eternity pressed into neat little stanzas. Your first attempt comes after a sleepless night, a rare windstorm shaking your shutters and scraping sand against the palace walls like fingernails. You light a lamp, sit at your low ivory writing desk, and begin scratching lines onto papyrus. You write about the sun, of course. Everyone writes about the sun, but then you pivot. You write about the taste of wind, the smell of wet stone, the ache behind your eyes that doesn't go away even when you lie to the priests and pretend you've slept. You call it Hymn of the Hollow Falcon. You're proud of the title. You share it first with your court scribe. He reads it slowly, nods thoughtfully, then smiles the kind of smile you usually reserve for children who bring you broken toys and call it treasure. A bold voice, he says, very contemporary, which is how you know it's bad. So you try again. You study the old verses, the hymn to the Aten, the lament of the sky god, the river songs carved into the walls at Luxor. You mimic their rhythm, borrow their structure, and bend your own thoughts to fit. You write about the Nile as a lover, the stars as judgment, the temples as bones in the body of the land. It sounds grand, it sounds correct. It also sounds like everyone else. You begin to understand why no one writes the truth anymore. Still you keep at it. You compose quietly, in the hours before dawn when even your dreams are too tired to visit. You avoid writing about war because it makes you sweat. You avoid writing about your father because it makes your hand shake. You write instead about the little things, the silence after incense burns out, the sound of a beetle dragging a broken wing across tile, the shape of the air before a cough. Eventually you compile a set of verses and have them copied onto scrolls. You sign them anonymously, just the royal seal, no name, and distribute them to a few trusted readers in the temple libraries and royal academy. The response is complicated. Some priests call the verses innovative, others call them unsettling. One particularly honest noble writes you a note saying, "These are not hymns, they are confessions. You're not sure whether to be insulted or deeply pleased." A few lines become popular anyway, quoted out of context, carved into the frames of mirrors and cosmetic jars. The sun does not rise for you alone, but it rises for you exactly once. You overhear a harem attendant whispering that line to a lover. You pretend not to hear. Word gets out that you're the author. Of course it does. Nothing inside the palace stays quiet for long, not illnesses, not affairs, not poetry. Soon, every court function includes someone interpreting your verses. They overthink everything. They assign divine intention to lines you wrote while trying not to fall asleep. You watch one priest deliver a 3-hour lecture on the metaphor of wind tasting like absence. You weren't even sure that line worked. The high priest confronts you privately. Your words reach ears not meant to hear them, he says. You ask, do they offend the gods? He replies, they confuse them. You try to explain that not everything has to be divine, that sometimes the pharaoh can speak as a man, not as a mouthpiece. He tilts his head. But why would anyone want that? And that's the question, isn't it? You host a poetry reading. Just once, a small affair, intimate. You sit on a cushion beneath the fig tree in the palace courtyard. The sun filters through the leaves like painted glass. A few nobles, some priests, your wife, and, uninvited but impossible to avoid, your vizier. You read the poem about silence, the one you wrote after the girl from the harem disappeared. You don't look up afterward. No applause, no chants, just wind. Later, your vizier approaches you as you watch the stars rise. They don't want you to sound human, he says. They want you to sound inevitable. I'm not inevitable, you reply. That's why it scares them. You keep writing, but privately now. You stop showing people. You write for the tomb. You write for your future self. You write for the wind. One night you write a line so beautiful it makes you cry, then immediately forget it. You try to rewrite it. You fail. It becomes a myth inside your head, the perfect poem that existed only for a moment, then vanished. Like the Nile, once a year, like breath. You commission a secret chamber in your tomb, small, hidden, lined with smooth plaster and open to the stars. You instruct your most loyal scribe to etch your poems there, quietly without signature, just ink and honesty in the place where your heart will rest. He asks if it's a shrine. No, you say, it's a whisper. Historical fact. Some pharaohs, such as Akhenaten, wrote their own hymns and poetry, including deeply personal verses that diverged from traditional religious language. Fringe fact. There are cases of anonymous poetic scrolls from the New Kingdom era that contain startlingly modern, emotional language, possibly authored by high-ranking figures. Debated issue, did ancient poetry reflect private thought, or was it always written through the lens of state and ritual? Scholars debate the existence of truly personal literary expression in pharaonic times. It begins innocently enough, with the question from a court priest during a ceremony. Have you prepared the script for your opening of the mouth? You blink at him, confused for half a breath too long, because the ceremony he's referencing isn't for the living, it's the central rite of embalming, the one that restores speech and breath to the deceased so they can function in the afterlife. It's done to mummies. To statues, to gods carved in stone, and apparently to pharaohs, while they're still breathing. You nod, pretending you already had it scheduled. That night, the priest sends you scrolls with examples from past reigns. You read them with numb fingers, not because they're frightening, though they are, but because they're so matter-of-fact. There's a checklist for pre-death rituals, a formula for coaxing the car to become unbound from flesh. One pharaoh even wrote notes in the margins about which side of his mouth to open first. You can't decide if that's dedication or madness, so you begin rehearsing your own death. It starts with the mask. A sculptor arrives to take your facial measurements. He presses smooth clay into your features, counting under his breath as if timing your heartbeat. The waxy mould will be used to design your golden death mask. So your true face will remain, he says. You try not to laugh. You know your true face changes every season. Next is the coffin fitting. Not the final sarcophagus, which is still being carved in your tomb chamber, but a wooden model painted in gold leaf and turquoise, a kind of afterlife rehearsal space. You lie inside it while the priest mutters protective spells over your body. Your arms are crossed over your chest, you smell oils, old paint, and the breath of the scribe leaning over you with a charcoal brush, marking lines where the sacred words will go. You stay in the coffin for 11 minutes, long enough to feel ridiculous, long enough to start believing it. Then come the spells. A lector priest recites from the Book of Going Forth by Day, whispering the liturgies meant to guide your bear, the soul that travels, through the 12 gates of night. You recognize most of the lines. You memorize them as a child, but hearing them now, addressed to your living self, makes your skin crawl. Let him pass without being devoured, the priest says, voice soft. You try not to think of the crocodile-headed demons waiting in the underworld's riverbeds. And then, the opening. It's symbolic, of course, just a ritual touch, a carved tool pressed against your lips, your ears, your eyes, the same kind used on statues to awaken them, but it's done slowly, reverently, as if you've already stopped being a person and started becoming an icon. You feel the chill of it for days. Afterward, everyone is careful around you. The court speaks in hushed tones. Your servants avoid your eyes. Your wife leaves small offerings near your bath, perfume, lotuses, beads carved with spells. When you ask her why, she simply says, "It's tradition." You realise with dawning clarity that everyone has begun to mourn you preemptively. Not publicly, not even consciously, but spiritually. You've crossed some invisible line, you're still here, still coughing, still attending council meetings, but in their eyes your feet have already touched the edge of the duat. You're both king and ghost. You lean into it. You change your speech patterns, slow your gestures. You walk like your body is half stone, half myth. You start referring to your own legacy in the third person during ceremonies. "Let his rule be remembered for wisdom," you say aloud. And the scribes nod. They carve it without blinking. And somehow this helps. Your power stabilizes. The court stops testing you. The priesthood begins treating you like a relic. Unquestionable. Irreplaceable. You've made yourself untouchable by becoming half dead. It's the oldest trick in divine rulership, and you've finally perfected it. But the cost is strange. You feel disconnected from your body, like a guest in a temple that no longer belongs to you. You stop recognizing your reflection. The mirror shows a face designed for eternity, not expression. You sleep in short bursts, you dream in symbols. Your food is blander now, your breath smells like old papyrus, and worst of all, you begin to fade from memory, your own memory. You forget the names of minor officials, you lose the thread of conversations. You struggle to recall what your favourite flower used to be. The palace smells like cedar and something you can't quite name. One day, a child runs up to you in the courtyard, the daughter of a junior noble. She hands you a papyrus flower she folded herself. "I made this for the pharaoh," she says. You thank her. She looks up. "But you're still alive, right?" You blink. She's just a child. But the question echoes like a bell down an empty hall. You don't answer. Instead, that night, you walk alone to your tomb. It's nearly finished now. The murals are vibrant. Your likeness appears in every chamber, always taller than the gods, always triumphant. You walk through the burial hall, past the jars that will hold your liver, your lungs, your intestines. You enter the central chamber and stand before your own stone sarcophagus. It's empty, waiting. You sit on the edge and close your eyes, and for a moment, it feels like rest. Historical fact: Egyptian pharaohs often prepared their own funerary rituals years in advance, and some participated in symbolic versions of the opening of the mouth while still alive. Fringe fact: in rare cases, live pharaohs were painted onto tomb walls in poses typically reserved for deities or the dead, blurring the line between living king and divine memory. Debated issue: did these rituals mentally and socially detach the pharaoh from daily rule, creating an almost pre-death retirement of authority? Some scholars suggest yes. There's a strange kind of betrayal in planning your burial while your heart is still beating. You walk through your tomb complex with the chief architect, listening to him point out where the backup food offerings will be stored, how the air shafts are angled towards specific stars, and how the false burial chamber, your decoy, will be sealed with 7 interlocking stone doors to confuse grave robbers. You nod, distracted, because you know the real theft is already happening, just not with chisels and ropes. It starts subtly. You notice your name being shortened in inscriptions, just a small thing. One of your royal epithets is missing on a stone tablet carved for the Eastern Hall. Then a wall panel meant to depict your victory in Nubia shows an alternate version, where a general rides beside you, almost your equal in height. You call in the artisan. He swears it was a miscommunication. You raise an eyebrow. He vanishes 2 days later, reassigned to a quarry in the Sinai. You try to ignore it, but more edits appear, small symbols out of order. Scenes where your wife is placed more prominently than usual. One mural, meant to depict you presenting grain to the gods, now includes your vizier in the background holding the scroll of offerings. You never approved that. When you ask about it, no one answers directly. The tomb evolves, the architect says, like a story being told. You look him in the eye, then tell it correctly. You begin to suspect the real work in your tomb isn't construction, it's negotiation. between memory and myth, between what you lived and what others want to say about it after you're too dead to protest. So you take control, you commission new inscriptions, long ones, lists of your deeds, some true, some exaggerated. You order your full royal titulary to be carved into the walls of the burial chamber in no fewer than 142 places. You increase the number of statues representing your bar. You even add a series of personal hymns, the kind you wrote in secret, encoded into the border motifs, hidden in plain sight. Still, you know what's happening. They're already rewriting you. One day you arrive unannounced at the artisan village where the tomb painters and carvers live. The workers look stunned. One drops a brush. The smell of pigment and sweat hangs thick in the air. You walk slowly through their studios, examining half-finished panels. One depicts you ascending into the heavens, not in your solar bark as per custom, but in the arms of a goddess whose face you don't recognize. You tap the artisan on the shoulder. "Who is that?" he stammers. "Mahat, or perhaps Hathor. The features were chosen for symbolic resonance." You walk away. The next morning, your great royal wife visits your chamber and places a single papyrus scroll on your writing table. It's blank. No title, no text, just a brush resting beside it. She doesn't say anything. You understand even she is preparing her version of you. You begin keeping 2 sets of records, one for the scribes, the public version of your reign, full of piety, control, balance, and one for yourself. It's not a diary exactly, more like a confession carved in private ink. You hide the scrolls behind the foundation stones of your private temple, a place where no one would think to look, till long after your body is dust and your name is smoothed over with the next pharaohs, because that's the part they don't tell you. Legacy is negotiable. Your tomb might be vast, sealed with curses and gold and guards, but names are fragile things. They can be scratched off, covered over, rewritten. You've done it to others. You know how easily a man becomes a story, and how easily a story becomes convenient. You begin placing traps, not mechanical ones. Spikes or pits are for amateurs. Yours are philosophical. You commission misleading cartouches in the decoy chamber. You create poetic riddles only your truest followers would understand. You instruct your tomb to be filled with fragments of stories, contradictory, layered, uncertain. Let future scholars argue. Let them wonder what was real. Let them never agree. Meanwhile, your inner circle fractures. Your vizier grows more visible in public ceremonies. He no longer walks 2 paces behind you. Sometimes he walks beside you. The priests refer to him now as the voice of the throne. You start dreaming of him standing in your tomb, speaking over your wrapped body, smiling. You confront him one evening in your chamber, just the 2 of you. "You're already planning my funeral." He bows his head. "It will be magnificent." You nod. "Will it be mine?" He doesn't answer. You watch him leave and realize, no matter how high your pyramid, no matter how many spells are carved into your coffin, your memory will belong to whoever writes last. You stop trusting your artisans. You stop trusting your priests. You stop trusting your own breath. One night, you wander into the burial chamber again, just to see what they've painted without telling you. On the southern wall, a new scene, your final judgment before Osiris, the scales of Ma'at, your heart in one pan, the feather in the other, and behind you your wife, your vizier, the priesthood, all waiting to see how it tips. You stare at the wall for a long time, then you order the paint scraped clean. Historical fact, some pharaohs' tombs were altered before burial, due to changing political dynamics or shifts in priestly power. Fringe fact, pharaohs sometimes included fake burial chambers, misleading inscriptions and riddles to confuse grave robbers, or rewrite their own narrative. Debated issue. How much control did pharaohs truly have over their posthumous image? Evidence shows that many were edited, enhanced, or erased within decades of death. There's a moment when you realize no one around you is as interested in your life as they are in your death. It hits during a seemingly ordinary banquet. Golden lamps, roasted duck, fig wine, lyres humming in the background. You're seated on your throne, the heavy collar biting into your neck, trying to decide if the honeyed bread is too dry when you catch your wife watching you. Not with affection, not with worry, with calculation. As if she's weighing the timing of something and your heartbeat is just one part of the equation. She smiles when she sees you looking. You return the smile because at this point, even your suspicion wears a polite mask. The room is filled with people you've known for years. Advisors, generals, priests, The same faces you've toasted during victories, promoted after campaigns, forgiven for mistakes that were not small. But as the music plays and dancers whirl by with practiced grace, a strange quiet hums beneath it all, like everyone is holding their breath. You excuse yourself early, feigning fatigue. You don't go to bed. Instead, you walk alone through the upper halls, torch in hand. You pass the scribes' quarters, where the night shift is copying tax records with the same tired posture of men who have long forgotten what day it is. You pass the royal kitchens, where spice lingers in the walls like old perfume. And then you reach the storage chamber, the one few others have access to. Inside you find it, a sealed jar with your seal broken, and a faint trace of powder at the rim. You don't need to be a physician to know what it means. Someone's preparing, someone is ready to hurry things along, you leave it exactly as you found it. You want them to wonder if you noticed. Back in your private quarters, you have the steward bring fresh water. You do not drink it. You smile. You thank him. Then you dismiss him and pour the water into a potted palm near your bed. The next morning the palm is dead. You don't say a word, because what's the point? This isn't betrayal. This is inevitability. This is what happens when a man becomes a monument, when your name is recited more often in prayers than in conversation, when the people who benefit most from your legacy realize that the best version of you is the one who stops breathing. So you make preparations of your own. You have a small hidden chamber built inside your tomb, not for your body, not for your riches, but for a single scroll. Inside that scroll you write the truth, your truth, not the god's version, not the vizier's version, not the hymns chanted in sanctuaries or carved into gold, just a plain record of what it felt like to live inside the crown. You sign it with your name and your birth name and your throne name, all three so that no one forgets. Then you start seeing her again. Not your wife, not your mother, the leopard. She appears only in dreams now, always pacing. Her eyes follow you, unblinking. She says nothing. Sometimes she's curled at the foot of your bed. Sometimes she watches from the window, her fur rippling with moonlight. You know she's not real. She's a symbol, a warning, a quiet predator waiting for the end of your reign, not with claws, but with silence. You begin carrying a small knife beneath your robe, not for defense, for control. A last word. If the end comes by someone else's hand, you refuse to let your final breath belong to anyone but you. You start refusing food during banquets. You limit your wine to one sip. You dismiss your cupbearer. You choose your own fruits. The court notices. They say you're growing paranoid. You let them say it, because they're half right, and also too late. Then one evening your wife visits you privately. No attendants, no servants. She pours her own wine. She sits beside you on the couch of carved ebony and leans close enough that you smell cinnamon on her breath. You know, she says, you could make it easier. On who? On everyone. You meet her gaze. There is no threat in her voice, only practicality, and maybe a hint of regret, but not love. You don't remember what love feels like anyway. You raise your cup, toast her, drink nothing. The next day, the vizier suggests a public ceremony to reinforce confidence in the line of succession. You nod. He's not subtle. He doesn't have to be. The ceremony is held at sunset with your oldest son beside you. 12 years old, too small for the headdress, but eager to wear it. You place the crook and flail in his arms for the first time. He nearly drops them. The crowd cheers anyway. You tell yourself it's practice. You tell yourself he'll grow into the weight. You don't tell him that weight never leaves your shoulders. Afterward, you return to your chamber and lie in silence for hours. The torchlight flickers. Your chest aches. You think about your tomb and your scroll and the statue of you standing in the western alcove, arms crossed, eyes carved too wide. You wonder how long it will take before someone erases your name, and then, finally, you sleep. Historical fact. Pharaohs often face threats from within their own households and courts, especially in old age or periods of weakened health. Poisonings, arranged deaths, and encouraged exits were not unheard of, though rarely documented directly. Fringe fact. Some royal tombs include inscriptions hinting at alternate successors, as if insurance policies were being carved in limestone. Debated issue. Did pharaohs knowingly allow their own deaths to be hastened, either out of resignation duty or a desire to control the legacy left behind? There's a stillness to your final days that you didn't expect, not fear, not pain exactly, just quiet, like someone's muffled the world behind thick linen, and now you're walking through it barefoot, feeling the edges, but not quite touching them. Your chest aches constantly now. The cough is worse. Your voice has thinned out into something brittle. Every morning the servants ask, "How is the pharaoh feeling?" And every morning you reply, "Like a god," because even now, you're committed to the bit. The courtiers don't make eye contact as often. The priests walk a step faster. Your children speak to you more formally, like they're practicing for eulogies. And the vizier? He's stopped asking questions altogether. He just waits, like he's counting down something only he can see. You stop attending court, you stop pretending, you start making peace with the rituals, not the afterlife nonsense. You've already done all the spells, the tomb, the masks. No, the rituals of departure, the closing of doors, the choosing of final words. You pick a scribe and dictate one last decree. It's brief, no sweeping reforms, just a redistribution of temple funds to repair a collapsed school in a village you visited once, years ago, and never forgot. The one where the boys taught each other numbers by scratching in the dirt. You remember the smallest one had no shoes. You write a letter to your eldest son. Not instructions, not warnings, just honesty. You tell him the crown isn't heavy at first, that it fools you, that the gold is light and the applause is loud and the statues are flattering. But then come the choices, and the people who disappear, and the nights where your heart is a stone in your ribs, and the gods don't speak back. You tell him to keep something for himself, anything, a word, a song, a crack in the mask. You have the letter sealed in beeswax and tucked beneath his bed while he's in the training yard. He'll find it later. Maybe too late, like everything else in this life. Your wife visits once more. She doesn't bring food or servants or an excuse. She sits beside you, and the silence between you isn't sharp anymore, just worn thin with years. She says, "They will call you just." You nod. "Will it be true?" you ask. She tilts her head. "Is it ever?" You don't answer. The high priest performs the final pre-death rituals that week. Symbolic anointing, libations poured over your threshold. A ritual meal you're too weak to eat. He chants the names of the gods in sequence with no inflection. They sound bored. You ask for one thing before it ends, to be taken to your tomb just once more. You ride in silence, veiled, unseen, not as a king, just as a man with thin wrists and a thin voice and a very loud memory. The guards clear the path, the artisans bow as you pass, most of them unaware they're bowing to the one who asked for 1,000 tiny stars to be painted in the ceiling of the inner burial chamber, just so you wouldn't feel alone when your heart left its final beat behind. The tomb is perfect, terrible, and perfect. The walls shine with stories you mostly approve of. There are inaccuracies, of course, the battle that didn't go as well as shown. The priest you never trusted, but who now features prominently in your passage to the Field of Reeds. But the faces are kind, the colours are vivid. Your eyes in the paintings look like they know more than you ever did. You lie down in the empty sarcophagus, not for real, not yet, and close your eyes. You try to imagine the moment your soul steps out of your chest and into eternity. You expect fear. Instead, you feel stillness. Not peace, but not dread either. Just inevitability. You return to the palace, but not for long. On the final morning, the sky is grey, veiled in soft clouds. A rare sight. No fanfare, no choirs, just a breath that doesn't come back. And then you go, not into fire, not into sky, into linen, into oils, into a silence that isn't silence at all, but the hum of your name being said by 1,000 mouths across the land. They chant it, they wail it, they write it down with ink that smells like resin and ash. The embalming takes 70 days. Your organs are sealed in alabaster, your body is packed in natron and herbs, then wrapped by careful hands. Amulets tucked into folds, prayers whispered into cotton. The opening of the mouth is performed one final time, not symbolically, not in rehearsal, but for real. The chisel touches your lips, the gods are called, your statue waits in the next chamber, and then they bury you. There is weeping, some real, some for show. Your wife weeps, your son doesn't. You understand both. Your vizier speaks last. He says, "He reigned with wisdom. He departs in glory. You'd have preferred. He tried." The tomb is sealed, the stone pushed into place, the air thick with the final breath of those who stood too long in sacred space. And now, you're a memory, a god, a painting, a poem no one fully understands. And someday, someone will find you, or forget you, or both. But for now, you sleep. Historical fact: pharaohs were embalmed and interred with carefully orchestrated rituals over several months, involving symbolic ceremonies like the opening of the mouth and intricate burial preparations. Fringe fact: some pharaohs' burial inscriptions contain deeply personal or even subversive messages hidden among standard liturgy, hinting at lost truths. Debated issue: did pharaohs achieve the kind of eternal legacy they imagined? Or were their afterlives shaped entirely by the living? The line between myth and memory remains blurred, and now here you are, where it all began and where it ends, laid to rest beneath a mountain of stone surrounded by treasures chosen not for use, but for what they say about you to anyone bold enough to disturb the silence. The world above goes on, the Nile keeps flowing, the priests keep chanting, and your name flickers through prayers like an ember. Sometimes honoured, sometimes twisted, sometimes forgotten entirely. Years pass, then centuries. Eventually your tomb is breached, not by gods or enemies, but by time. Dust creeps in where incense once burned. The seals crack. The paint fades. The stories on your walls erode grain by grain until your face becomes just another smooth patch of plaster. Even your name, carved in 100 places, gets chipped away by hands searching for valuables. Gold is gold, after all. Divinity is only divine until the next king needs the space. But in the stillness, something remains. A poem etched in secret survives behind a fallen panel. A statue you commissioned stands untouched in a forgotten hall, still watching, still waiting. A child in the future finds your likeness in a museum display and asks, "Who was he?" And no one has the same answer. And you're still here somehow, not as a body, not as a god, but as a whisper, as a myth flickering on the edge of someone else's dream. Your story changes with each telling, but the bones of it remain. The crown, the cough, the poetry, the leopard. You were divine, you were doomed, you were disturbing, and you were real. Now, sleep. You've earned it.